Hey everybody, welcome live to the Jim Masters Show, live entertainment lifestyle celebrity talk show series. It is my honor and great pleasure to welcome this incredible group of talented, beloved, and legendary folks joining us here from the iconic WCBS Newsradio 880 in good old New York City. Look at your screen. Lots of years of incredible hard work, talent, and passion for what they do, all skilled professionals. You know, I work in the industry as well, gang. We've talked about it a lot. I work in television and radio and have for years. And when I wanted to put this together, you know, we wanted to do it a certain way. We wanted to honor and celebrate, of course, the station, but the people behind the station, and to find out what they've been up to, some of their passions, maybe even share a story or two that stood out for them in their life, and why they got into the crazy but beloved world of broadcasting. And it is my honor and pleasure to welcome this group, this talented group here. Look at what we have for you. This is exclusive and a real pleasure here at the Jim Masters Show to have put together. When I reached out to these fine folks you see on your screen, every single one of them said immediately, yes, yes, and yes. When and where, let's come together, let's celebrate, and let's enjoy. Wayne Cabot is here, Todd Glickman, Anita Bonita, Peter Haskell. These are all names you've heard for years on the legendary WCBS Newsradio 880. Levon Putney is here, Bill Schweizer, Rich Lamb, Jim Feldman is going to join us as well. And that's just a few of the many, many folks behind and in front of the microphones who made the magic for so many years on the beloved station that we've all enjoyed listening to. And it doesn't exist anymore, of course, we know, since the summertime, but we wanted to, you know, remember and share and have a good time with all of you. Feel free to comment. The show is live right now. I know a lot of people have been very excited about this episode of the Jim Masters Show live series. And if you want to comment, feel free to leave a comment on our YouTube channel. Say hello. What are some of your fabulous memories, stories, on-air personalities from the station that you've always enjoyed? Whether you live in the tri-state area, we are here in the New York area in the United States. So this is a station we grew up with. Matter of fact, I couldn't tell you the amount of times that as a kid, I would always hear WCBS Newsradio 88 coming out of our bathroom. Why? Because Dad has always loved that station. And there's been so many people sharing these stories about their family members, their parents and their grandparents who had that station on for years. And as kids, you know, you would always hear the station on in the kitchen, in the backyard, in the car. My father would take the transistor radio out on Long Island. My father grew up in New York City. We were raised out on Long Island. And that transistor radio would go into the bathroom with him when he was getting ready for work in the morning, and he was shaving and getting ready to head off, to slay the dragon. And we would always hear WCBS coming out of the bathroom. We'd hear it in the kitchen. It would be in the car. So it was a beloved station, part of our family, the Masters family, and all our relatives and neighbors and friends. And I know for many of you, the same thing. You had a real attachment for the station, the people, the sounders, the stingers, kind of like we played just now, and so much more. When you heard all that, you knew what to expect. Quality, excellence, and people who really cared and love broadcasting, as you know I do as well. And broadcasting is going through an interesting time right now. So, you know, we wanted to celebrate this beloved station and the people who have made the magic. And again, if you'd like to comment during the show as well, we encourage and welcome you to do that. Before we welcome our illustrious cast here on the show, just wanted to show you some of the other extraordinary people who have been on and have come through the hallways and the airwaves at WCBS. Can you recognize any of those illustrious faces? I mean, that station, the gold standard for news programming. Of course, it didn't originally start as a news station. The station almost 100 years old. It was around 57 years ago or so when it transformed into a news station, the preeminent in New York. There in the top of your screen, these legends on air at WCBS. Robert Trout, the upper left-hand corner, and of course, Edward R. Morrow, you better believe it. Douglas Edwards, Eric Seravide, of course, And look on the bottom left, the good old Charles Osgood. And of course, Walter Cronkite was on there as well. Dan Rather also on the air, various shows, various reports. The Osgood File, of course, remember Charles Osgood. And look who else, of course, the beloved Ed Bradley. And Frank Gifford was on as well, and Pat Summerall. Yeah, and there's Charles Kuralt, of course, as well, and so many others. And again, as we mentioned there, you have all those fabulous faces. Then you have all these faces and voices. Charles Kuralt, as I mentioned, as well. Ed Ingalls on the bottom left, another legend. Lou Adler, of course, as well. And Gordon Barnes. I believe he was the very first weathercaster, too, at WCBS. On the bottom right, we wanted to dig up some real great photos here of people you might not have known graced the airwaves at the station, good old 80. And also here's some more. And of course, Fran Schneido, the wonderful Fran Schneido, and Jim Connolly, and Robert Vaughn, and Tim Sheld, and Pat Farnack, and Bridget Quinn, and of course, Sean Adams as well, and Marla Diamond, all a part of the WCBS airwaves and the WCBS family. And some other familiar faces as well, part of the family that you see there. Can you recognize all these fabulous faces? Absolutely. Deborah Rodriguez and good old Craig Allen. Craig wanted to be here tonight. He wasn't able to join us. I've known Craig for a long time. He's a fabulous person, and he wanted to be here tonight, but he was called away. So he's with us in spirit. All these folks are. And of course, Paul Bernane as well. You heard him for many years on the station. And Sophia Hall. Ironically, Sophia Hall, who's in the upper right-hand corner, she and I actually ended up doing a corporate video on Long Island, and I was cast as the on-location reporter, and she was the news anchor. And this was back, I would say the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, good old freelance work that we do in this industry. And of course, Michael Wallace there, and Steve Scott as well, there in the bottom left. Mike Zirinax. I knew Mike Zirinax from Connecticut when he worked out in the New London Groton area. I worked for WTYD, WNLC in New London on the air, and he was working, I believe, for WSUB in Groton, Connecticut as well. Tom Kaminsky, another fantastic legend, of course, up in the air with traffic. And also, there's a few that I've had the pleasure of meeting as well at various events in New York. And of course, I'm talking about Irene Cornell. This was at the Inner Circle, actually, which is a wonderful event where all the New York news anchors, reporters, and talent from radio and TV and more get together and with the politicians, and they put on a fabulous show. And on the right, the incomparable Jane Tillman Irving. We were at the Salvation Army of Greater New York City's gala event with my PBS colleague, Denise Richardson. Denise and I were on WNAT 13 co-hosting, and Jane happened to be at the event as well. Two additional legends that graced the airwaves for many years on WCBS. It was such an honor and pleasure to meet them as well. So for me personally, as a broadcaster on the air for a long time, station we grew up with, pinnacle of radio broadcast on that AM dial, and of course, sadly missed. So we've put together some of your friends here to celebrate the station, but also to find out what they're up to and some behind the scenes things that they're doing and working on as well. So we hope you enjoy it, can interact with us. We are coming at you live. And now we're going to bring in our illustrious cast of characters, these broadcast professionals extraordinaire. Maybe you've heard their voices, but you never really saw their faces unless you saw billboards or maybe things on the sides of buses or commercials. Let's start off with a legend from broadcast media. Rich Lamb is here. Rich, it's such a pleasure and an honor to have you here on the Jim Masters Show, my friend. Welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy day. And Bill Schweizer is with us as well. Bill, welcome to the show, my friend.
Good to be here and good to join all of these people that most of them that I've worked with and others that I've listened to over the years.
It's a real pleasure. A lot of people are excited when you were on too, because they know you're from CBS Sports and so much more. And I think we even have a lot of mutual friends at some of the stations in Connecticut as well. WELI and KC101. I was on ELI for years as well. And Todd Glickman is here. And Todd Glickman is surrounded by some other legends. Todd.
Yeah. So I have a picture here of Black Rock, 51 West 52nd Street, in the newsroom that's overlooking the producer's desk. And the left side of the picture is Gary Moorer, who was the first anchor that I worked with. That would have been May 5th, 1979. And I think if I push the chair a little bit, there's Jim Morris and Legler Bronson, who were two of the great producers that we had at that time. And for every one of us that you heard coming out of your speaker, there were at least 2 or 3 people on the other side of the glass that were helping to make the magic happen. And I hope we can salute them today as well.
Absolutely. It takes a village. It takes a team. And Todd, literally just about 12 hours ago, landed, back east from the West Coast. You are all over the map, my friend.
Yeah, it was a long weekend, but a worthwhile trip. But it's good to be home.
Absolutely. Another incredible legend and a voice like butter, the incomparable Wayne Cabot is here on the show. Wayne, welcome to the show, my friend.
Jim, thank you for having me. It's great to be on a screen with 3 guys who I grew up listening to.
At home
Thanks,
in
Wayne.
New Jersey. And I want you to share the story, Wayne. I know you did. You guys did such a beautiful job. That full weekend, millions of people listened to it. Were glued to it. The final weekend in the summertime, and the wonderful. Well, when we get to talking with everybody individually, that wonderful story about your dad taking you to the station in from New Jersey, and how that really impacted and inspired you. And then all of a sudden, years later, here you are on the station, which is such a beautiful turning point in your life. It's good to have you with us, Wayne. And Peter Haskell is here, a name you've always heard on WCBS Newsradio 880 for years. Peter, thank you for joining us as well.
Jim, thanks for having me. This is a great group and really a great opportunity to pay tribute to a terrific radio station.
The pleasure is absolutely all mine, my friend. Welcome here to Broadcast Haven, the Jim Masters Show. Anita Bonita is here as well, and she's got beautiful lighting, and she's got colors, and she looks like $1 million. I love her
I'm
setting.
afraid that I don't have a lovely thing like Todd has behind him. All I've got is Milton Glaser poster from WORFM.
Hey, that's great. And Anita, I have to say, Anita is, if you want to do something, if you want support, if you want somebody on your side, Anita is the person. Anita has been so not only excited, but so supportive and sharing and suggesting and helping behind the scenes in a beautiful way, Anita. She's been sharing this all over social media because it does take a village for weeks now. Anita, I really appreciate your enthusiasm and desire to be here with us and join us on this occasion.
Well, thank you for having us, Jim. And I've had the good fortune to work with almost everybody currently on this screen and whom we're about to add. And Bill and I used to hang out in the press box at Shea Stadium when he was at WCBS and I was working for CBS Sports.
Yeah.
That's right. Great stories. So many more to share. And Levon Putney is here as well. Levon, welcome to the show, my friend. It's a pleasure to have you with us too.
Thanks, Jim. Nice to be here with some old buddies here. And yeah, you mentioned Anita. Anita's been helping me. I hadn't known how to put a resume in PDF form, and Anita helped me with that. So yeah, she really has been helpful behind the scenes. So it's just having fun with some old coworkers here. It's a great night here.
I have to tell you, I've always enjoyed listening to you. We took a trip, when we would drive to and from the Northeast here to Florida. I would always have the station on because obviously you could hear it across the country and into Canada. And you've got this unique style, Levon. It's so casual and warm and fun. And it's as if we are speaking across the kitchen table and you're you're not announcing the news. You're informing us, but in such a unique way. It's a terrific style that you have, especially at the times that you were on, which were perfectly suited.
Thank you. Yeah, the music helps late at night. People love that. But I just felt like being laid back and just being me. And me is pretty silly. And so, mind laying that out there and just being honest with folks, because that's the name of the game. I mean, we're giving people information, and so you want to be real. You want to be honest, and hopefully the way that I did it comes through. And so, yeah, I just didn't want to do it any other way. Or don't. I'm not looking to retire just yet. Hopefully, if I get a job.
This just in. They're all auditioning right now, folks. So give us a call. Jim Feldman is with us as well. Jim, the gang was saying that you might have been stuck in some traffic.
A little bit of traffic on the Tappan Zee Bridge coming out of Westminster.
Because he knows traffic so well. Jim, thanks for joining us as well. And I think that we've known each other well before this and may have met at Carnegie Hall.
That's right.
When I MC the Christmas concerts for Tim Janis and his big Christmas concert at Carnegie Hall.
That's where we
through
met.
my work with PBS all these years, and you're a big fan of all the whole gang there. So It's really great to have you here on the show, my friend.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to see you. It's great to see everybody. I haven't seen anybody since this all happened, so it's really great to see everybody.
It really is, absolutely. And gang, I just want to thank you one more time for taking time to join us here in this occasion. Maybe before we get into some of the other things, we can have maybe each of you share a memory that stands out of your time on the station, or a particular story that was a personal favorite, one that either touched you, moved you, maybe made a huge difference in the community because of the reporting or the coverage, whether it is, sports or traffic, weather or news. And I'll start with you, Rich. You've done so many for decades, a true legend in the industry.
So I think no one here would disagree with that 9/11.
Yes.
I'm here. Can you hear me? If I
my audio probably just a little delay there, but yeah, you're good. You're good to go. You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can hear me now.
We hear you now.
Like
exactly.
I'm on a Verizon ad here. All right. I think no one would disagree with me that 9/11 is surely the most important story that we all covered, and it made the biggest impact. Of course, people were really, you have to remember, most of the television stations were off the air as soon as the World Trade Center towers went down. So radio was phenomenally important, especially WCBS and the kind of coverage that we provided. And I think Peter Haskell did an awful lot of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is clearly one of the biggest stories we all covered. And I think, one of the things that I think is so important is that the radio station was committed to covering the story, not just 9/11 and 9/12 and 9/13, but every single year telling all the tentacles of the story, from the rebuilding to the health program and the victim compensation fund. And every year, I mean, it was a real labor of love for Rich and I to be at the 9/11 memorial and to really try to not only remember and never forget, but really to explain to people and give context and to talk about what it was like that day, the sacrifices that were made, the sacrifices that are still being made. And so that was always very important to, speaking for Rich, for the two of us and for the radio station, to really do that day justice and do justice to the people, their heroic efforts, and who gave their lives and are still struggling with the health problems to this day.
And Wayne, how about you? I mean, you've reported on and covered so many stories, lighthearted stories, serious stories. Is there one or two that personally stands out for you?
Without a doubt, as Peter and Rich said, 9/11 was the most profound thing to happen to us professionally and maybe in our lives, speaking personally anyway. And for so many people who just lost so much that day. And for us, the impact it had on WCBS and those who worked there was made so clear in the years later when we would see documentaries and news clips of people on the street as the towers were coming down, as they were scrambling, as they were trying to get information, as they were standing there, some with car radios blasting, some with boom boxes, trying to find out what was happening in their city. And we'd hear the voices of WCBS played back in these news clips and these documentaries. And in the moment when you're in a studio talking to your co-anchor or to the producer or to the wall or glass in front of you, you have a vague perception that there are people out there maybe hearing your words. But in a moment like 9/11, when you see people depending on your words and yearning for information, there is nothing more profound, and nothing drives home the potential importance of this job than in a case like that. And that, of course, is the most glaring, obvious example. But as you pointed out, Jim, there's also a lot of lighthearted moments people pick up on, too. It's often the throwaway lines or the time fillers, time killers that you think you're just trying to get through the clock to the next break. And those are the things you get the most responses from listeners about. The way you goofed on the Cars for Kids commercial, or as Levon said, the song you played. So I think we reached people on so many different levels, but the moment that sticks out as the most profound and important one, without a doubt, was that awful day on 9/11.
How about you, Todd? You've covered so many weather-related events, of course, that have really shaped us in so many different ways. Superstorm Sandy and blizzards galore and all these different situations. For you, is there a story or two or an event while covering it that stands out for you?
Sure. There are really two contrasting events. One, as you mentioned, Superstorm Sandy. I got a degree in meteorology, and we were told that the scenario that created Superstorm Sandy couldn't occur, that you couldn't get a storm so strong in that place moving in the direction that it did that would impact the New York metropolitan area in the way that it did. And a couple days before the event, so this would have been late October of 2012, so 12 years ago, Craig and I were chatting, looking at the weather computer models and saying, what's going on here? Because they were so consistent from run after run after run about an incredibly powerful storm that would hook left turn into the Jersey Shore and put New York City on the most dangerous side of it. And about 12 hours before the storm hit, it became what's called extratropical. It scientifically stopped being a hurricane and started being a really powerful other kind of storm. And because of government bureaucracy, they had to stop issuing hurricane warnings and issue different kinds of warnings. And a lot of confusion occurred. And right about that time, the tide was so high in Long Island, where our colleague Craig Allen lives, that the water was literally lapping at his stoop, if to use a New York word. And he called me on Monday afternoon, I think it was 4:55, and said, I have to evacuate my family, you're on. And I was on the air for the next 30 hours, 6 to 8 live hits per hour through the night and the following day, taking New York City through an event that we really didn't think could happen. Saying things like cities and towns on the Jersey Shore that exist today will not exist tomorrow. That lower Manhattan will be submerged. The tunnels will flood. And it was the magic of AM radio, as Wayne was saying, during 9/11, that allowed New Yorkers to connect to us to get that life-saving information. So put that aside as probably the most dramatic and impactful one. The one that I had the most fun, and this occurred maybe 20 times with my colleague Peter Haskell, and Marla Diamond being at the finish line of the New York City Marathon and doing the weather live from there and cheering on our runners and helping our WCBS team with that incredible landscape of runners from all over the world coming through our beloved Central Park, no matter what the weather. And we had to talk about it in that context. So that was really, from the memorable side of fun, it was the New York City Marathon.
I bet when you were at the station and you were there that 30 hours, a lot of people would say 30 hours at work, that must have been awful. You must have hated it. It must have been. And I bet you really thoroughly enjoyed every second of it, exhausted, drinking the coffee, whatever, just being so all in as a professional, as a broadcaster, and knowing that people were depending on what was being delivered and what was being said. We had a similar situation when I was on the air on WTYD FM and WNLC AM out in London, Connecticut. I was on the air and there was a production guy in the production department. There was somebody in the AM, and I happened to be on the FM. I was on the AM, and then I did the FM in the afternoon, AM in the morning. And it started snowing and snowing and snowing. This was around 93, 93. And it just started snowing and snowing and snowing. And it got to the point where we literally could not get out of the building. It was, 3/4 of the doors, the windows were covered. It was just unbelievable. And the general manager was calling, and the program director, you guys got to stay on, you got to keep going. And we were getting all these bulletins and doing what we could do to, we were circumventing music, circumventing other programming to just stay on. And we were getting bulletins from WTIC in Hartford, which was sending emergency bulletins down. And people, and I say that we were in there for many hours, and we had, we're digging through the refrigerator, eating nuts and stale potato chips, whatever we could find. And people would say the same thing, like, oh, that must have been a drag. That must have been, I'm saying it's one of the most incredible parts of my broadcast career that I fondly remember, because I knew that people were depending when we said highways are closed and don't go out and do this and do that, and if your power goes out, the importance of that was overwhelming. And I still, to this day, fondly look at that, not as it was a job and it was grueling and, the coffee was stale and everything. It was something that was rare and phenomenal. So I can plug into what you're saying, Todd, very much so.
Yeah, it turns out that I wasn't in the studio. I'm in fact, I was during Sandy sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in right now at my house, all alone, hoping the power didn't go out, because we had the same storm here. And the power and the internet was my lifeline to connect to the radio station, as was the case during COVID for everybody on this screen, all of us working from home. And it's the magic of radio and technology that allowed us to do that.
And Jim, you bring up a snowstorm, the public officials say don't go out unless you have to. And Wayne Cabot's driving in to be on the radio, and Rich Lamb and Levon Putney, and I'm driving around to let people know, to go to neighbors, talk about what's happening on the roads. Jim's talking to traffic. We're out. And Wayne's coming in, and the reporters are out telling stories that are important to communities. Not just about, the Merritt Parkway's closed, but about there's power out in this community, or there's a potential building collapse here. That's not just the magic of radio, but really the importance of what WCBS did, not every day, but clearly year in and year out, when there was something important happening. Reporters and anchors and folks behind the scenes were there to tell those stories and to inform.
That's the station that was turned on when there were major, it was on all the time, but definitely when major things were happening where you needed good, serious reporting. And, just having you guys on 24/7, it's a lot of stations don't do that anymore. A lot of stations, there's automation and, stuff is pre-recorded, even the station ID or the time, it's 10 after the hour, which could be any hour, but you guys 24/7, there doing it as it's happening, which again is a dying art. unfortunately, in these industries. But God bless you all for doing that. Anita, you too, you've reported on so much, you've anchored all of it. There's a story or two that stands out for you, Anita?
Well, I would like to keep this light. I have 3 of them, only the last of which involves me. But before I even get there, so Russ and I are watching this old show, Person of Interest, last night, and all of a sudden there's a guy in the back seat of a cab, and he says, "Put on the ball game." And he goes, "I don't want to hear no ball game." Yeah, 8:80 a.m., put on the ball game. So even from a TV show, we somehow ended up on it. Now, as to my stories, this first one is so old, it predates Craig Allen. Lou Adler and Jim Donnelly are at the anchor desks in the morning, and they're doing some story about this school in Virginia that's changed its name. The upshot is it becomes EIEIO. They throw it to the estimable Neil Bush in the traffic watch helicopter, who without missing a beat says, "Well, guys, it's a beep beep here and a beep beep there." But that's not all. When Neil finishes, he then says, and this is how you know it's before Craig Allen, he says, "I'm now going to throw it to Old McDonald in the WCBS Weather Center." So WCBS has a history of taking the news seriously, but not itself. And that takes us to story number 2, in which Paul and Wayne are doing a story about mother dolphins adjusting their tone of voice when they have to discipline their calves. And all of a sudden, and forgive me, Wayne, I don't remember which of you it was, but one of them comes out with, "Flipper Francis Dolphin, you come out here this instant." I almost broke off 2nd Avenue. Now the last one that involves me. It's a week where I've already worked 5 days. Saturday night, 6:32 p.m., my phone rings. It's our operations manager, Ray Martell, and the conversation proceeds in precisely this manner. "Trump's been shot. We're in the 8th inning. How quickly can you get here?" I got there by 10 after 7 and then went on with the rest of the evening's festivities.
Wow, that's incredible. Gee, that's amazing. Those are some stories, Anita. And Levon, you too. How about you? Some stories that stand out for you personally?
Yeah, I was sitting here trying to think about that. As an anchor, you're writing stories and they're coming and going.
Right.
But as a reporter, 2 stories that New Year's Eve, let's throw that in there. New Year's Eve was fun. And as someone from Houston, not from here, and, coming here in 06 is when I got here, being able to just be there for New Year's Eve in Times Square, that was fun. That was just a great experience. But another story, one popped to mind, is just being thinking like a reporter. It was a small plane crash in Rockaway at the Rockaway Mall, just there last month, actually. And there was a bunch of people who were around. And so I was a reporter at the time. I didn't start anchoring until about 2011, 2012. But they sent me out there. And when I get out there, there are just a bunch of people who saw the plane crash, saw the pilot and the other person get out. Everybody was okay. But the fun part about the thing, what sticks out, is the fact that I was able to talk with so many people and took an approach where I'll ask everybody the same questions. And what you saw, what do you think about what you saw? And something along those lines. And what happened was, I was able to take all of that sound from about 8 or 9 people or so, splice it all together, and the reports that I was able to write up and get on air, it were all about, within about 40-second story, I think about 30 seconds of it was sound, was just them telling the whole story. So I was able to, by actually asking them the same questions, just splice it all together to where they were given an account blow by blow of what happened. And that story sticks out to me is just because of the way it went down and just how it sounded to me. I was just proud of being able to do that. And that one always sticks out to me.
That's a great one. Thanks for sharing that. That's a terrific one. Bill Schweizer, how about you?
I was at WCBS for about 2 weeks and still in awe of everybody that was working around me. And Ed Ingles went on vacation, so they kind of slid me into morning drive to do the sports with Lou Adler and Jim Donnelly. Well, right then, 1981, baseball went on strike. So now you're doing a morning drive sportscast and there's no baseball. So what the heck are you going to talk about? Well, I, got into a little, Wimbledon was going on. I gave them some tennis stuff, some golf stuff. And then I didn't do it every sportscast, but it was, I just figured, well, you know what? People want to hear some baseball scores. So I threw in the scores of the Yankees and the Mets AAA teams. The second time now in the studio, once I go on the air, Jim Donnelly gets up and he goes into the newsroom and he's pontificating about whatever he is that particular day. Lou Adler is sitting there, not paying any attention to me. He's doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. So after the second time I've given the minor league scores, I get up and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I start walking out of the studio and Lou says, "Bill, if there's no baseball, Major League Baseball, the hell with the scores." So that was even a better story, though, is how I got to WCBS. And for this part of the story, I had no idea, but Anita did an interview with Keith Olbermann as the days were counting down for WCBS. And apparently, Keith, still a student at Cornell, had gotten in touch with Lou Adler and was pushing to get the afternoon and evening sports job. And he thought he was a shoo-in for this. Now, on my end of it, I really didn't know Lou Adler, but I did know Ed Ingles. And so I talked to him and Ed said, "Look, just get me a tape." I was at CBS FM at the time doing morning sports there with Harry Harrison. And so I got the tape, got it to Lou Adler. And a couple of days later, I called Ed. I said, "What's going on?" He said, he goes, "Lou doesn't think you're ready yet." Now, of course, I think all of us, that is like your ultimate goal, to be on News Radio 88. And I was very disappointed, but it was like, okay, I can stick this out. I'll get better and I'll improve. 3 days later, I was at home and I get a call from Lou Adler. "Bill, this is Lou Adler from WCBS. I have a full-time opening for an afternoon sportscaster. Are you interested?" 3 days later, I was ready. And I said to Lou, "Do bears live in the woods?" "Yes." He goes, "Well, be in my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and we'll get all of this straight." Now, little did I know, but Keith Olbermann still holds the grudge that I got the job and he did not. So
That is, what a story. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Bill. And Jim Feldman, too, man about the roads. Tell us maybe a story or two that stands out for you, my friend.
A couple of stories, actually three, like Anita had. One as a listener. I was at a different radio station when 9/11 happened, but a few years after that, if everybody remembers the blackout, the radio station that I was working at was out of power. We had a propane tank in the back that wasn't working, so we were not on the air. So the only station that we were listening to get our information as to what was going on was WCBS 88, because that's just the radio station that everybody wanted to listen to. So as a listener, back then, 880 was important, and the importance of AM radio. And as a traffic reporter, when I first started, I worked for a service out in Jersey that provided the traffic for 880 before they brought it in-house. And Levon will remember all of these overnights that we worked. And this particular overnight, I was 2 years into my career during the overnights CBS on the weekends, and the pressure cooker bombings happened in Lower Manhattan that September. And here I am, 2 years still green, doing traffic, not really knowing what to do, and just feet to the fire, thrown in. You've got to figure all this out. You've got to figure out where these closures are. You've got to figure out how to get all the information out. It was cracking because I wasn't really trained as a reporter. My background is as a DJ and as a production director. So, as I mentioned, it's feet to the fire, and that really was when it hit me that, yeah, this is now the other side of the important information that has to get out to all of those listeners. And I can't screw this up. I have to get all this information correctly and out there with all the closures. And then just a funny thing is, again, Levon will attest, because a lot of those overnights, myself and Levon and Joe Avalar during the overnights, it's just, as anybody who has worked an overnight knows, it can be very boring, especially when there's no traffic to talk about and not even any construction. And we're waiting for the bars to let out. So maybe hopefully there'll be something to talk about. Just the stuff that goes on the air, but then the stuff that goes on off the air on the IFB, just to kind of keep ourselves entertained. That's a lot of the stuff that I fondly remember Levon and everybody else during the overnight.
Of course, we have the rolling content going on.
Yep, Rick rolling all the time.
Yeah, Jim, I just want to point out, Todd mentioned Superstorm Sandy. Jim mentioned the 2003 power outage. These were the times, not just when 880 was desperately needed, but when it really shined, when people were in a dire situation, they needed information, they wanted information, they really couldn't get it anyplace else. People didn't have a computer in their pocket back then. And even now, when people do have computers in their pockets, there was credible, accurate information coming through their radios and their smartphones and their smart speakers. And I think that really speaks to the importance of the radio station.
How did you guys initially have this passion for broadcasting itself? Was it something like, for me, I was always, a kid that knew all the call letters and followed everybody on radio and television. I've always enjoyed the industry and studied it in school and interned and did all of the things, the farm system, like all of you did, work, and you start the $5 an hour at the station at midnight, spinning a record or something, and then working your way up. For you, Wayne, you shared a story on air about your father and the opportunity to actually go to the station and tour it. Tell us about, for you, the inspiration to even want to go into broadcasting.
Well, as you said, Jim, you had the experience, I think we all had, of being in the back of the car and being forced to listen to the news because that's what our parents had on. My dad was a big sports fan, so he would have on WCBS at quarter after and quarter up. And back in those days, actually, no, let me correct myself. Back in those days, WCBS was 12 after and 42 after, and WINS was on at 15 and 45. So we'd have to listen to all those sports reports. And in between, since he was a Cleveland, back then, Indians fan, we'd listen to the scratchy station coming in from Cleveland. And we'd be told to be quiet in the back seat while he had the scratchy AM radio on, and he was blowing cigarette smoke in the back of the car with the windows closed. But that was a different era. And you know what? It brings back fond memories, and it cemented WCBS in particular, and WINS as well. But WCBS as being like the station of authority, the station that mom and dad and official New York metro area listened to. So when I got a little bit older and I needed to know the weather and I wanted to know what time it was to set my clock, as I mentioned in the podcast or in the send-off, I put that station on. And Jim Feldman, as you pointed out, you're starting out on this radio station without any real guide, but yeah, you did have the guide. We all had those guides. We listened to these people. It became part of our collective experience as kids in the back seat, as listeners of our own, so that when it came time to try to do it ourselves, we had more than a vague notion of what the sound of the radio station was. So it made it easier to try to keep that sound going. And when my dad brought me to the radio station, it was against the advice of the ad executive who arranged the visit. She said that television was much more interesting and that she can get me in to see Channel 2, she can get me in to see Channel 7, she can get me into any of the TV stations. And I said, I really want to see WCBS and see what's behind the scenes there. I listen to it, I hear the voices, it intrigues me. There's an energy, there's a power and a passion. She said, okay, suit yourself. So she arranged the visit, and it was 1978. And my dad brought me there in rush hour traffic in the middle of the morning. He was an educator. He was the vice principal at South Orange Maplewood School. And his thinking was, if you were to play hooky for a day, it'd be okay as long as it were educational. If it served a purpose, it was essentially a field trip. So that was our field trip. And it served a purpose for me. And it was amazing that I spent 37 years there getting to work with all of these people around me. By the way, I kind of feel like Paul Lynde in the center square here, which is how I made my living for a bunch of years, making 50-year-old references.
You're dating yourself, exactly.
You got any Paul Lynde zingers for us, Wayne?
Yeah, you do bring up a great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rich.
I think one of the
Or
great
you
things
like
about
South Australia,
WCBS was there was a. I thought you were done. You got more? No, I think one of the great things about
That is funny. People are wondering, is that what they actually said to each other behind the scenes at the station? Are you done with your story? I want to go next.
Sometimes.
Okay. All right.
You're all set, Rich.
So I just think that one of the great things about WCBS was, I guess I must be on delay here, but one of the great things was that it had a lighter side, a human side, and Charlie Osgood brought that to the fore all the time. His little poems in the morning, you could just depend on Charlie to entertain you or tell a serious story in a very different way. Such a personal touch he had. And I'm reminded of what I thought was a very funny thing that happened with Muhammad Ali. I don't know if you remember this, but Muhammad Ali came into the radio station. He was promoting something. And Rita Sands and Harvey Houtman were the two midday anchors at that point. And they'd done an interview with him. They got to the end of the interview and they're signing off, say, "Well, thank you so much, Muhammad Ali. It's what." He says, hang on a second. He said, "Wait a minute." And they said, "Well, what's going on? What's the matter?" He says, "Listen, see, I love your program. I admire your style, but your pay's so cheap. Don't call me for a while." It's just great. I mean, you just can't do better than Muhammad Ali. Really
Absolutely.
funny. And Ed Ingles, I think, went to Manila, didn't he, to cover the Thriller in Manila?
He did,
I remember,
and he also
this is
went
when
to
we
Zaire
traveled. I went to
cover
Saudi Arabia,
there.
Central America,
Rich, what first enticed you
different
to want
era.
to go into the wonderful world of broadcasting? What were some of the first things you did to set yourself on that path of becoming a broadcaster, Rich?
Well, I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, listening to WTIC and Bob Steele, who was the dominant morning voice, and I think he had 65% of the audience.
A legend.
And never got paid adequately either, because he wasn't SAG-AFTRA. I was a shop steward. I would have fixed that. Anyway, I loved WTIC, which was the Travelers Insurance Company, poured money into that radio station. And it was magnificent to listen to. That's what I thought all radio was. As the quality level there was phenomenal. And I believed that that's what it was across the board. Of course, my first job was in Royal Oak, Michigan, and 1,000 water went 250 at night. And if you drove out of the parking lot, you'd lose the signal. So it was a very different reality when I got into the business. I lucked out and got to WXLO in New York, 99X. And that is when I really began to listen to WCBS. I was doing the morning news there, and I would base my newscasts on what I heard on WCBS. In fact, when I went into audition, I stood in front of the building, looked at the CBS logo and said, "This is never going to happen. I'm just on a fool's errand here." And so went in, they handed me the copy and they said, "You have 2 hours to write the newscast." And I'd written all the same stories all morning long. So I just did it really quickly. And about a half an hour later, I went into John Wheeling's office and I said, "I'm ready." And he says, "What are you talking about?" I said, I'm ready to go." And then we went back. And then at that time, they had pitchers of water in the middle of the studio. And there was a guy whose job it was to keep the pitcher filled and put 4 glasses around it. And I thought the thing had a little flap on the top when you poured it, but I went to pour it, and instead the cork popped out, and I poured about a pint of cold water right into my crotch. And I involuntarily stood up. And everybody in the control room cracked up. I mean, it was an inauspicious beginning. And I figured there's no way I'm going to get this job. I got the job.
You got the job. That is amazing. What a story. How about you, Peter? Did you always love broadcasting as a kid? Was it something you always aspired to? And what were some of the,
that was a
trajectory for you that pointed you in the direction of doing this work?
There was something about it when I was a kid.
Did you spill water too, or lemonade?
I spilled a lot of things, but none of them involved radio. But I grew up listening to radio and just fell in love with it as a kid. And it was something I always wanted to do. I didn't want to be on TV. I didn't want to write for the newspaper. I loved sports, and I would listen to Marv Albert, do his magic with the Knicks and the Rangers, and Bob Murphy with the Mets. And as a kid, I would sit in front of the TV with a little tape recorder from the 5 and dime and turn the sound down. I would do the play-by-play off the TV. And that's how I started. It was just something I always loved and always wanted to be in radio. Went to school and studied broadcast journalism and worked at the college radio station. And that was the start. And just had great fun doing it for, over 30 years and just loved every minute of it. But it's something I just grew up always listening to the radio. There was just something magical about it.
Absolutely. And still is and always will be. How about you, Todd Glickman? What sort of ported you in the direction of getting into the world of broadcasting? And was it something you always admired? Did you grow up in the Boston area?
No. I grew up in Roslyn Heights in Long Island.
Oh, Roslyn Heights. Okay.
And
So
we
New
were
York
a
was your
WOR family.
WOR.
So I listened to Rambling with Gambling. And of course, Gene Shepard at night. I said, Dad, can I listen to Shep tonight? He said, only for a half hour. Yeah, right. We know that doesn't happen. And so I'd be with my, pillow over my head listening to Gene Shepard. And I became enthralled with what was going on the other side of that radio. So when I was 15, I said to my mother, I want to go down to WOR and see how they do this stuff they call radio. So my mother picked up the phone and called. And 2 days later, the educational field trip happened. And I got to watch Rambling with Gambling live from their studio at 1440 Broadway around the U-shaped desk. And I remember all the other people. I think, Peter Roberts was there and Jack Allen was doing the news. And there was this weather guy. I had no interest in meteorology at the time. And his name was Bob Harris. I'm sorry, Dr. Bob Harris. So this was 1972. And some years later, I went to MIT. I decided to study meteorology. A friend of mine was the general manager of the MIT radio station. I got involved. Love of radio blossomed. Cut to the chase. A couple of years after school in 1979, I was working for a private weather company. And we got the contract, along with Norm MacDonald, to do the weather for WCBS, my hometown radio station. And whose place did I take? Bob Harris. Because he was fired for not being a doctor. And it was only 7 or 8 years between those two events as a youngster of 15 or 16 going to WR. And I was 23 when I started at WCBS 45 years ago. And the love of radio blossomed. I'm still the advisor to the MIT student radio station. In fact, we had a Zoom 1 hour ago with the management of the station just to talk about how things are going. So radio's been in my blood since I'm a teenager.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Anita, how about you? What
first
inspired you?
First off, Dr. Bob Harris became our meteorologist at WNEW after that, Todd.
You mean weatherman, not meteorologist.
Yeah, excuse me, weatherman. And he'd play the piano for us.
He was very talented. He was a great communicator. He was a good forecaster.
but not a meteorologist.
Not a meteorologist.
Anyway, getting back to where
And he
I
ended
got
up on
my,
Channel 11 too, didn't he? Action
Yes,
News,
correct.
WPIX. Yeah, Pat Harper and
Just
Steve
plain
Bosch.
Bob, they called him.
Yeah, I remember that.
I always had one foot in music radio and in news and sports. I used to listen avidly to Mets games coming in from all over the place, and other Major League Baseball games too. When I ended up working for CBS Sports, I had the pleasure of telling Jack Buck that I grew up listening to him. And he said, "And where in the Midwest did you grow up?" I said, "Westwood, New Jersey," because you could get KMOX like a local at night. Likewise, of course, and I know Wayne will identify with this. You know, I grew up worshiping at the altar of Dan Ingram and Cousin Brucey. So I ended up doing both for a number of years. I did news, sports, and being a jock while I was in college. I worked in music radio for a number of years. I was part of the original staff at Z100. And then, as I said, went on to WNEW, where I was their last assistant program director. I actually interviewed at WCBS in 1988, and it only took me 30 years to get there.
Yeah.
And when you did, what was that feeling like?
As Wayne said, we'd all grown up listening to this. So it was after 2 very short training sessions, I got thrown on the air because I knew where everything went and how it went, because I'd been listening to it for so long. I don't think there's been a single day since 1979 that I haven't listened to that radio station.
Wow, that's amazing. So, you know, you stuck with it and it led you to those beautiful doors, and you made your mark all those years on that station. And Jim Feldman, how about you as well? How did it come to pass for you, and what are some of the inspirations you've had along the way that pointed you into the direction of wanting to get into broadcasting?
Well, just like everybody, as a kid, you're listening to the radio, you've got your tape recorder, you're ready to hit record, you're waiting for the DJ to shut up so you can get get the song.
Yeah.
But I actually wanted to become a DJ at summer camp. I was at a camp. I was a waiter at a camp in back of the woods, Connecticut, and they had a low power radio station, a very low power radio station. And I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool. So one of the DJs said, well, just come on, you can hang out. And was hanging out in the studio and seeing him do his thing. And I thought, wow, this is the coolest thing. I'm like 15, 16 years old. And I said, this is what I want to do. And my parents said, really? This is what you want to do? I said, yes, this is what I want to do. So did the thing that everybody else did. You know, you go to college, you study communications, you work at the college radio station. And I'm sitting at the college radio station one day waiting for my shift, and the phone rings and I answer it. And it happens to be Susan Richard, who is now the morning anchor on 1010 Wins. She was the nighttime DJ at WFAS at the time, and she was looking for an intern for her nightly request show on Friday nights. And of course, I said, yes, I'll do that. And that was in September of 1989, and I haven't looked back since. I worked at FAS for 25 years. I was a DJ. I was the PSA director. I was the production director. Whatever I could get my hands on, I did. And then eventually made my way to CBS 880. And again, I just haven't looked back since, and still trying to get back into radio again.
I would imagine too, you know, there's something about CBS, the Tiffany network, you know, the radio side, the television side. Something I've always felt too about CBS. As you guys went into the station, and here you have this opportunity to go on an iconic station, did you feel that the weight of the network, of the heritage, of the excellence of the people before who laid the groundwork, all of that, you know, the Tiffany network sort of mindset? I can only imagine, you know, you're pinching yourself as you hear, even just saying those beloved call letters, WCBS. Did you feel an essence of that, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. When Total Traffic was the traffic service that provided the traffic for CBS before they brought it in-house, and then when they decided to bring it in-house, when I got my ID and it said CBS Radio on it, because it was still owned by CBS Radio at the time, I was like, this is it. I made it. I'm not only in New York City, but I'm on WCBS 880. This is absolutely a dream come true.
Absolutely. How about you, Bill? Too, you've had a lot of great experience and opportunity. Growing up as a kid, was broadcasting, radio, TV, was this something that interested you, or
no thought of it?
No thought at all?
I played baseball and did pretty well doing that. I had a baseball scholarship to college. I had some major league teams that scouted me. I had a tryout with the Cleveland Indians. And then in my senior year in college, I popped a disc in my back. And all of a sudden, the major league teams weren't interested in me anymore. So I thought, you know what? I write pretty well. Maybe I can get a job as a sports writer and still, be close to what I love. Well, I went knocking on all kinds of doors in the newspaper industry and got told the same thing every place I went. Well, you don't have any experience. I thought, well, if you don't give me a job, how can I get experience? And then one day I'm sitting at home reading a sports magazine, and there was this full-page ad for one of these 15-week broadcasting schools. I thought, that's it. I'm going to do that. And I remember telling my father that, and he just kind of looked at me, because I had already graduated from college. I had my degree. He just looked at me. He goes, do you know how hard it is to make it in that business? I said, well, I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So I started this 15-week course, and after 10 weeks, I got a job at a small station in Ellenville, New York, doing news. And from there, it just went. From Ellenville, I went to the booming metropolis of Newburgh, New York. And then I went to Connecticut, where I actually got the job doing UConn basketball and football. And from there, ended up at CBS FM, and the rest, as I say, is history. And I wouldn't change any of it.
Wouldn't change any of it at all. Yeah, it's you guys are very lucky with the opportunity to stick with such an industry that, as we are seeing, is changing before our eyes. And what do you see as the future of broadcasting as a whole? Obviously the internet and TikTok and all these things have come into our lives now. What are your thoughts on broadcasting, radio, television, the whole thing, Rich?
Okay, then. Well, I think the whole news business, the whole news business is in trouble. I mean, look at the newspapers. They're really, I mean, the internet, the combination of that, and all the kids are looking at their phones. So it's a really tough time. I mean, they talk about headwinds. It's a tropical storm or maybe a hurricane. I mean, it really is a difficult time for the news business. The broadcast news business, I think, is being affected in a dire way, but not more so than the newspapers. I mean, the newspapers are, most of them, with few exceptions, are very thin, have few reporters, and nobody's watching the politicians. I mean, it's just, in some cases, apparently the feds are watching the politicians, but in terms of the news business, it's a really difficult time. Where will radio go? I think there's a future for it. I think it's on thin ice at the moment. Who knows, though? I mean, everybody thought that the movie business would go out when television arrived, and that radio would be finished at that point. So I'm not sure that the roadmap is very clear, but it certainly isn't encouraging at the moment. And for this great treasure of a radio station, WCBS, those vaunted call letters to go down is just it's a tragedy. It's terrible for those who've lost their jobs. It's a really bitter day, I think, for the listener, who now really misses the quality broadcasting that they've grown accustomed to.
What would you say to somebody who's watching, who's considering a career now in broadcasting? They're seeing all of you They're hearing this conversation. They watch people on TV that they admire, what have you. Maybe they even have a little old school nature to them, and they want to be a broadcaster. They hope to get on radio. They hope to be on television, whatever it may be. What would you say, as somebody who's done it for so long, what would you offer as far as advice to that person now in this environment? They want to be a tried and true broadcaster.
Well, I would just say it's a difficult way to make a living these days. If you have a trust fund, that would be very helpful. But it's an essential part of democracy. I mean, we really need the news business. You really need reporters to watch, as Gabe Pressman used to say, or one of his editors used to say to him, you have to have somebody to watch the rat holes and make sure that they aren't stealing from the people and that they aren't duping the people. So we have an essential role to play as journalists. It's just that at the moment, the bottom is falling out of the financial end of things. I think there's a tremendous enthusiasm on the part of younger people for democracy, for the role of the news business. It's just you have to be real with them and say it's going to be a tough row to hoe when it comes to making a living that way.
And Wayne, too, for you, being such a tried and true broadcaster and lover of the industry and been involved in it for so many, many years, what would you say to somebody who is considering getting into the industry now? And what's your feeling about, the state of the industry from your experience?
I can tell you what I would say, and what I would say is what I do say, because believe it or not, there is quite a number of young people who still are interested in radio, not just news generally, but radio specifically. It is a bit surprising to me because I've seen what a lot of stations pay, and as Rich pointed out, a trust fund is not just helpful, but probably necessary to get started. Then again, I started in high school and I was living at mom and dad's house as well. But I know there's a need. And I know that because I feel that need. I don't know what to listen to anymore, personally. I get in the car and there's a void to me. And I assume that there's a void to others. I know there is because I get the letters and the notes and the social media messages and the emails and even, as I said, the physical letters. People feel that void. So if there's a void,
you do. Yeah.
Then there is a need. And if there is a need, then there is something that's marketable. Profitable? I don't know. As Rich said, the finances are really in a downward spin right now. Is there a method? Is there a formula? I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is just yet. And I would encourage anybody who wants to get into the industry to be smarter than we all are and maybe figure it out.
That's a good way to put it. How about you, Peter? For you, the state of things now, and also what would you offer to somebody who, reveres this industry and has always been excited about it, and they're considering partaking in it now?
So it's interesting. I am teaching journalism this semester at Fordham. So I've got a very limited sample size, but I will say there are very few students who get their news from TV or radio. And so what I tell them is, yes, it is a very difficult business, but if you are able to understand the importance of journalism, as Rich and Wayne have talked about, if you are able to be credible and accurate and fair, my hope is that there will be a place for someone to report the news. And look, think about 20 years ago, nobody imagined the way the news would be delivered now, be it Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I'm not sure how people will be getting their news in 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. But if you have the skills and the ability to be credible, to be accurate, to be fair, to understand how to tell a story, my hope is there will be a place for that. Whether that's the case, I'm not in a position to predict, but it's clearly a very difficult atmosphere right now. And the other thing I'd say to the students, it is important that you are good citizens, that you are consumers of news, that you understand news literacy. Everything you read on X or Twitter, everything you see on TikTok or Instagram is not necessarily the truth. And so I think news literacy is part of that as well. So it's a difficult environment. My hope is that really smart, enthusiastic people want to get involved and will find a platform to tell important and stories that impact the lives of their communities.
And all of you, and those that are no longer with us, and those who wanted to be here but weren't available tonight, and other things of that nature, I just got to say again, as a fellow broadcaster, and on behalf of everybody you're hearing from, we showed a little photo there of, this is just a small pile on Wayne's desk of letters that he gets, and I'm sure all of you are, from the consumers of the information, the friends, the families, the people, not just in the New York tri-state area, but that station reached, the entire country and into Canada. So, you've heard from Iowa and Colorado and Toronto and other places. And I'm sure it's very touching to know that we really touched the lives of so many in such an incredible way. It's a phenomenal team of people on air and behind the scenes to make it. I always say to everybody, we work to make things seem so easy, effortless, and smooth, whether we're in radio or in television, people that are on stage, people that are in film. It's all to take you away from your problems and cares, and let us take care of you in the way that we can and try to ease some things for you. But behind the scenes, what it takes to do that is a Herculean effort every single day. And you guys, and the others at WCBS have certainly done that in such a eloquent and excellent way. And it's a tremendous, of course. It feels like a friend has passed for a lot of people, me as well. Anita, you as well too, being the talented professional you are and in the biz so long. What would you say to somebody who wants to get into this industry right now, and your feelings about the state of the industry, radio, television, all of it?
In 2006, I was working in South Jersey at WJRZ. I was the morning show co-host and news director. I'd stay down there during the week, and then every weekend I would come back up to New York to be with my other half, and I would stop and visit with my parents in North Jersey on my way home. One of those Fridays, I didn't know was going to be the last time I would ever see my dad, with whom I used to listen to WCBS in the car. The last words my dad ever spoke to me were, "You should always be able to do something you love." And that's what I would say to anybody who was asking me about the state of radio and whether it's worth it. You should always be able to do something you love. And if this is what you love, then find the place to do it.
That's beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. Levon, how about you as well? What would you say to somebody who is looking at all of this and, gee, I would love to get in. I've always wanted to get on radio. I wanted to be on TV. And what would you say to a person like that, as well as your feelings about the current state of things now? I mean, life is changing so quickly, and everything is so ramped up now. Don't even have time to breathe and, have a cup of coffee. Levon? Can you hear us, Levon?
Oh dear, I think he's frozen.
Are you frozen, Levon?
He's rickrolling.
I see. Levon, can you hear us? So maybe he is frozen. So, how about you, Jim? We'll slide over to you, Jim. Because you look like you're eager to answer that.
Well, have a plan B. You should always have a plan B, but to not be discouraged. It was maybe a month or so before this all happened that there was a tour of college students that came through the newsroom, and they were all bright-eyed and excited to be there. And in the middle of my traffic reports, watching Ray Martell give the tour, and I'm thinking, look at all these kids that want to come into this industry. Then, of course, on the other hand, I'm thinking, wow, look at all these kids that want to come into this industry. Why would they want to do that? But as Rich and Peter and everybody has said, there's still a need for news radio. It's like Rich said, to watch the politicians, or traffic. I mean, I know there's Waze and there's Google Maps, but one, there's no personality with that. And two, that information is not entirely accurate all the time. I was going into Westchester today and stuck in traffic at the back end. I didn't know why. There was nothing to tell me why I was stuck in this traffic until I turned on a radio station to let me know why I was stuck in this traffic. So there's still a need for journalists, for reporters, for anchors. So don't get discouraged. You may not work in New York City right away. You may be in White Plains, New York, or Southern Jersey, or somewhere in Oklahoma, but it's still radio. It's still something that we all love. And if you have that passion, don't get discouraged.
Well said, my friend. How about you, Todd? What would you say to somebody that's considering jumping into the broadcasting world now, and your feelings about the current state of it?
Well, I'll talk, I guess, from the standpoint of meteorology. The universities are still pumping out a lot of meteorologists because it's a fascinating scientific field. There are about 20,000 meteorologists in the United States right now, and I believe the number is 8% are in broadcasting. The rest work for the government or university or private sector, what have you. But the kids coming out of school, they want to go into television for the most part. And the same kind of consolidation is occurring in the television industry as is in radio. The salaries are going way, way down. I have friends who have worked for decades at major market radio stations. Their salaries are literally cut by 50%. And their hours are increased. They're doing a lot more than TV. They have to do social media and all that. So what I recommend to the meteorology students, if you're interested in broadcasting, is first of all, do a dual major or a master's degree in business. Understand the business world as well as the scientific world, because then you're well positioned to go into the private sector, whether it be for an airline or utility or an insurance company, to help them understand the weather. Agricultural companies hire meteorologists, and that combination is very useful. And if you still like broadcasting, there's still opportunities to work part-time. And as all of my colleagues here know, that's what I did. I worked for WCBS for 45 years part-time, never full-time. Just a very quick Lou Adler story, which I think complements the one that Bill Schweizer told. After 2 years of part-time work, when Norm Macdonald did Monday to Friday, and I was doing weekends from 79 to 81, and Lou wanted to part ways with Norm, he called me up. He called me to his office. I went into his office at BlackRock. It's literally the door behind me in the picture on my screen here. And he said, I'd like to offer you the full-time job at WCBS. And I said, Lou, this is my hometown radio station. I love working here, but I'm working in a weather-related business right now, and I think I have a bright future there. And so I'd love to continue part-time if possible, but thank you, but no thank you. No one has ever turned down a job from Lou Adler. That's what he said to me. And I kind of shrunk down in my seat. Thank goodness he hired Craig, who was kind enough to keep me along for these 4+ decades. But to answer your question, Jim, I think it's having a number of different kinds of backgrounds, combine it with business, combine it with anything else, and maybe do broadcasting on the side as a hobby. And if you're lucky enough to find that great little niche that can sustain you full time, absolutely go for it.
Well said. And Levon, welcome back. It's good to see you once again.
Yeah, I know. Good to be seen. Yeah, I had some problems here.
It just froze a little bit.
I missed a lot. I had all kind of signal problems, so I really couldn't hear much of what was going on.
I love that shirt. That's now a collector's item too. Now we can actually see the shirt with the logo. We were talking about what would you say to somebody who, loves the broadcasting industry and maybe always wanted to be a broadcaster, and they're looking now to get into the industry now, whether it's radio or TV or both. What would you say to them, and what's your feeling about the current state of the industry?
The current state is a little scary. I mean, given the way things are, we're having fewer and fewer options of news as far as radio. Now, print, there's just many more options online, TV, more and more options. But the bottom line is, when it comes to anyone who's interested in getting into this business, please do. Please do. We need people to have that interest and love of this game in order to just keep it going, because stories always have to be told. People always need to know what's going on around us. And so it's never more important than now to, if you love storytelling, if you love giving that information, giving news to people, then we need folks into this. And it should come with some realistic expectations. Money isn't the way it used to be. And the jobs aren't as plenty as they used to be, at least in radio. But I don't know if radio news is going away as much as changing. We're all online nowadays. And so, a lot more of our content is going to be online. But the radio stations are still here, and they still will be, because you will need those radio stations. And so, from my vantage point, I remember a little while ago what I could hear was the last part of you asking everybody from their standpoint of what inspired them to get into this. Well, for me, it was my father. And, I don't want to bring anything down, but he's coming out of heart surgery today. And so I have sisters and brothers hitting me up as we speak. So hopefully that's all good news. It was just a little while ago. But the bottom line is, my father, he was in radio. And I was pretty much born into it, because he was KULF and KYOK in Houston. Then he got a job out in LA at KJLH and at KACE and a couple other stations. He did some freelance work. So, it was something that I pretty much was born into and got that love from there. Now, anyone else with, an interest in this, find whatever it is, because the other part of my love for being in radio or radio news, I should say, because my father, he did more of morning show type news. He was more of a character. It was more of a, personality. But my mother and my grandmother, they were news junkies. And so for me, growing up under my dad's desk while he was on air, and me watching him while I'm looking up at, at him cutting and splicing and throwing carts in and out, that gave me that love for radio. But as far as news goes, it was my mother and my grandmother, just from them always being news junkies and me growing up in the house watching them, always watching the news, always reading the papers every day. And so whatever it is any youngster wants to use or needs to use to get into this, use it. If it's storytelling, use that as the love for getting into this, because we need good storytellers. And it's so important in terms of engaging the listeners. People want good stories, and you tell them a good story, they'll remember what you're telling them, and that's just how we are as humans. And so if it's, just being a news hound, hey, this is the business for you. So whatever it is that you can tap into to get into this, please do, because we do need this. We do need journalism to keep growing and keep going into the future, because, it's just scary if you look at it in one case of our station going away in terms of changing formats. But, it's not in terms of all the other options that you have, especially online. And people are finding news. We just need to help them find trusted news and find good information that they know they can get from someone that'll be engaging, that they'll want to keep coming back to get that info from. So that's what I would tell youngsters. Whatever it is that inspires you, use that as the fuel to get into this business, because we do need people to get into this business and keep it going.
Absolutely. I asked them too as well, what was their feeling. when they first walked into the building housing WCBS and to the studios with the whole CBS aura and the Tiffany network for television and radio and just everybody involved and all the people that the legends that, Everett R. Murrows and all the others. What was that feeling like for you when you first stepped into that building and went on the air?
Now, if you're talking about me, that first feeling, the day I got my ID card that said CBS News on it, CBS Radio, and the I, and just to know that I was walking into this building where all of these people that I grew up watching from TV standpoint, because I love 60 Minutes, still watch it. And the funny thing is, when I was in upstate New York, I was working there at a station there, Weenie, in upstate New York for about 1.5 years. I wrote 60 Minutes correspondent Bill Bradley, asking him, how can I advance? Do you have some advice, anything to help? Because, I see how you have stations in New Orleans and all. And, and that was at that point in the late 90s when I was just a few years out of college. And so he wrote back. And it's short. Now, I still have that letter. I'm not getting rid of that letter. And so he offered some just nice advice. And the day I got hired, all I could think about was, I want to meet Bill Bradley. He passed away, not a year or so after I got there. Never got a chance to meet him. But I also went to college with Russ Mitchell. And so he wanted to help me meet him, but we never got that chance.
Thanks for sharing that as well. And Mr. Schweizer, sports extraordinaire. How about for you? Obviously sports is still very much a part of our society, and there's all these outlets and all. But how do you feel about the state of the industry now? And for you, what would you say to somebody that wants to be a broadcaster? They want to be, a Bill Schweizer or Wayne Cabot or Anita Bonita.
Well, I would tell them that you've got to have some patience, because you're not going to snap your fingers and have everything fall into place all at once. And as far as the sports angle goes, I would tell them to be as versatile as you can, because there's so many different facets in the sports industry. There's, studio shows, there's talk shows, there's play-by-play. Try and give yourself a little bit of an edge by being as versatile as you can.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. That's the versatility is the key in this industry for sure. Got a couple of photos you guys were generous to send our way, which we're going to scan through, but are there any funny moments or unusual moments that happened while on air, while at the station, things that you wanted to share that are sort of lighter memories of doing what you've done? Anita, how about for you?
I think I pretty much said them all in some of my earlier comments. Yeah, well, actually, all right, here's a lighter memory. For about 3 years after the retirement of Vicki Allen, I was usually the person who did that shift alternating with Levon. And so we had lots of little, watchwords and routines that would go in. And Levon, in playing me in when I would come back for midnight, would either play La Isla Bonita or he would play Bonita Applebum. And if he played Bonita Applebum, I would come in and start dancing, because it was the running thing. It would be, it was, and the idea, of course, was to make him crack up on the air, which I frequently did.
Which you did.
And one of the things that I treasure is a little a handover in which Levon is saying, "Anita's dancing," and then it went right into the top of the hour, and I remember saying, "That's what happens when you don't stop the music."
That's it. I remember there was this it was WTYD FM, and I was coming back from PBS actually in Hartford, and I had turned on the FM station because I had been working with them, and I heard at that time it was music, and I heard the station playing Barbra Streisand, and it was an adult contemporary station, so that made sense. You'd have a Barbra Streisand song on, but then I heard another Barbra Streisand song, and this was like midnight coming back from the TV studio. Another Barbra Streisand song, and and it was like an hour of Barbra Streisand songs, one after the other. So the next morning, I went into the program director's office, and I said, "Hey, Rick, kind of interesting. Maybe something a little different. You know, it was late at night, and you were doing maybe like a Barbra Streisand hour or something like that." He said, "Barbra Streisand hour? That wasn't supposed to happen. I guess probably the CD machine, because it was all CDs then, wasn't queuing the next song on the next CD and just kept playing everything that was Barbra Streisand on the CD that was contained in the CD player. And for an hour, it was Barbra Streisand as opposed to all the other songs that were supposed to be playing, which was technology can sometimes throw a monkey wrench into things, huh, gang?
Well, you just mentioned about it being midnight. There was another running thing that I see Levon laughing now.
I'm laughing at because I just realized I said Bill Bradley as in the Knicks and not Ed Bradley. But,
Ed Bradley,
yeah.
But it used to be that when Levon would hand off to me at midnight, and I would do my headlines before going to the news at the top of the hour, I don't know why I did it the first time, and so of course I had to do it every time after that. It would be, "It's midnight," and the listeners loved it. They're still right. The last It's Midnight that I did was December 15th, 2022. Listeners still write to me about it. They send me memes. I have a whole bunch of It's Midnight memes that were sent to me over my phone.
You know you've made it when you're either a meme or you're on SNL. Exactly. How about you, Wayne? Any? Yes, absolutely. Wayne, any quirky, funny stories? I'm sure there's millions of them, but that you want to share some craziness behind the scenes at the station?
For me, it was 37 years of crazy stories. Working overnights and weekends for many, many years. We had a lot of commercial breaks that were live reads. So they weren't really breaks. You'd be reading the news, and then you'd be reading a live commercial and going back to the news. And I read a commercial for the New York City Ballet. And it was a live read, a 60-second read. And at the corner of my eye as I'm reading, I see Rich Lamb walk into the studio, and he hears me reading about the New York City Ballet, and I can see in my peripheral vision Rich Lamb doing a pirouette off to the side. I wasn't able to finish reading that commercial. Richard looking like he just, it's the lag. Now he gets it. Another story also involves Rich, where after our shift, we went to leave for Chinatown. He knows. We walked out to 6th Avenue to the NYP zone. We went to jump into Rich's mobile unit. And as he's putting his equipment bag in the trunk, I walked around to the passenger side, waiting for him to unlock the door, and realizing he didn't need to unlock the door. Somebody had picked the lock. Oh, and that somebody is asleep on his front seat, passed out. Apparently, he'd gone to steal Rich's radio, and whatever substance this man was on just knocked him right out. I said, "Rich, there's a man in your car asleep." Rich thought I was full of shit. Didn't believe it for a minute. Walked around. Am I telling a gospel, Rich?
That's a true story. Yeah, I'd forgotten all about that, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I can tell you a story that happened to me when I was in. It was one of those nights when nothing was going on, and that often happened on the night shift. And they would send me somewhere, and they sent me this night to the. It was the birthday party for Governor Carey. You remember Governor Carey? It's a long time ago. So there was really nothing. I mean, this was a fundraiser. It was $1,000 a plate thing at the Waldorf. And I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do with this? There's no news here. So the band is playing, and I'm doing kind of a story about, when I was a kid, we played, pin the tail on the donkey. Nobody invited me to the Waldorf. And I'm trying to get through this stupid copy, and somebody's tapping me on the shoulder incessantly. And I'm going, I thought it was a colleague trying to get me to boot a word. And it just kept going on. And finally, I did boot a word, and I whirled around, angry, and it was Frank Sinatra. And he goes, "Be good to me, kid." And I'm like, I didn't even have the presence of mind to do anything with it. I just stood there with my mouth open. Frank Sinatra? What? A really crazy story, I know.
That is incredible. How about you, Peter? Any stories that stand out, the little quirky, funny, or things that just happen to happen as part of what we do?
Yeah, so Rich talked about going to something and, having nothing there. It was the first day of summer, and I got assigned to see the world's largest popsicle in Union Square Park. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So first day of summer, it's hot. Long story short, the popsicle starts melting and it creates an oil slick. And people are walking, they're wiping out, bicyclists coming out to wipe it out. I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. I hear a fire engine in the distance. I'm like, I hope that fire engine's coming here. The fire engine comes up, so it's radio. I'm recording the fire engine. I'm recording the firefighters hosing down the street. Got angry people who were slipping off bicycles. A story that I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe you're sending me here, turned out to be one of my favorite stories. Great radio story. You got the sound of the people falling, the fire trucks, the fire engines, the fire hoses. And it was just, that's the magic of radio. So sometimes you think you have nothing, and it turns out to be a phenomenal story, especially for radio with the sound.
That is fantastic. I love that story. How about you, Todd? Being in weather, I'm sure there's a lot of things that.
Yeah, well, actually, this one doesn't have a lot to do with weather. So I mentioned that I worked at the MIT student radio station, and of course, I learned to be a disc jockey and read the news. And somehow I stumbled through the sports reports because reading the names of the college basketball kids wasn't always easy. One day, I'm sitting in the WCBS News studio in Black Rock, 51 West 52nd Street. So it's probably, I'm going to guess, in the 90s at some point. And sometimes I work from home and sometimes I would be in the studio, but I was in the studio that Saturday morning and sitting next to an esteemed anchor colleague of ours who will go unnamed. And I recall it was 11:28, which, as everybody knows, is time for traffic and weather together. And I did, the traffic came before me. I think it was Lou Adams. And I did the weather. And right after the weather was a very short 15 or 20 second commercial before the bottom of the hour sounder played and then the headlines. And as that was playing, the anchor turned to me and said, "Todd, I'm having intestinal discomfort. Take it." And he got up and left the studio. And there I was at the board with a stack of cartridges that all of our sound played on, the news bites and the commercials and the PSAs and all that, and his scripts, which had been printed out, of course, because we used a lot of paper back then. And I picked it up, and I was the news anchor for 20 minutes. And I ended introducing at 11:48 Lou Adams to do the traffic, and he introduced me to do the weather. And the anchor came back in and said, "Thank you," and continued his half hour.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And Mr. Feldman, how about you?
Well, it seems most of these stories happen on the overnight. So I hate to give away to all those PDs that are listening, not knowing what goes on in their radio station during the overnight. But most of it was when I was doing the overnights with Levon and Anita. But with Levon, and he's not here, he probably has some signal problems. But a lot of the joking that went on off the air, if you're listening to the station at 3:00 on a Saturday morning, you're hearing Levon or Anita or Joe or whoever else, myself, just laughing for no reason. It's because of what we were also doing off the air and the jokes that we're telling. At the time, I was in Rutherford and everybody was down at Hudson Square, so we're all talking through the IFB. But just those jokes back and forth off air that somehow always seem to manage to get on the air. And the other fun thing about radio, and again, why I tell people not to get discouraged, because radio really is unlike any other industry and any other business around there. The stories and the fun that you have. I was working overnights again at WFAS, and as everybody knows, it's just very boring. So what did I do? I brought my laser tag with me. So in between songs, and this was also when everything was on CD, so you have 4 minutes before you got to run and segue. In between songs, myself and the overnight news reporter, news anchor, and the overnight board op on the AM are playing laser tag in the middle of the office. I don't know any other place where I would be able to get away with that. It's just fun. And Jim, you were talking about technology. Another thing, I was training somebody to be a DJ on the weekend on the overnight. And at the time we had the Denon CD players that had the play and pause buttons. You know, it had the little case that the CD was in, and you slide it in and it plays off the pop. Well, I was sitting out of the doorway of the studio with a rubber band around my finger in the shape of a gun, trying to shoot the rubber band to pause the CD. He didn't know what was going on, the guy I was training, but I managed to get it a couple of times just to see how he would react, and he would freak out. But of course, we had a nice big laugh about it. But that was the fun of radio. Still is the fun of radio, just the things that you get to do, joking with everybody on the air and off the air.
Splicing all the tape, putting the carts in the cart machine, and the last person maybe didn't clean it, so you put it in for the station ID or whatever it is, and it goes whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa. So many stories. How about you, Bill? I'm sure a lot of quirky, fun, crazy moments over the years, huh?
Yeah, there's all kinds of unimaginable stories, but some of my favorites: working afternoon drive with Pat Parson and Ben Farnsworth. They were like an old married couple. One day you'd walk in and everything would be great and they're having a good time. And the next day you walk in and they're at each other's throats. Well, one of the things at the end of each sportscast, we would give the horse race results. The track would call them in, the desk assistant would write down the numbers, and it had to be like a half hour after the race was completed. So most of the time I had the sheet in front of me before I went into the studio. This particular day, I'm in the middle of the sportscast, and the desk assistant comes in and just slips the piece of paper down in front of me. So I start reading the horse race results. Winner of the 7th race at Belmont this afternoon, letter B, hung low, paid, and I started giving the prices. Well, you know, I'm holding it together until Pat leans over and whispers in my ear, "You peaked." I had to bite my lip for a good 10 seconds before I could go on after that one.
For anybody listening doesn't know what we're talking about, you didn't want to have dead air and you didn't want to overmodulate.
I didn't want to laugh on the air.
Right. That's a great story. We have some wonderful photos that have been sent in by you guys, and thanks for digging through your vaults. Rich Lamb, this is a very, very important moment, not just in New York, but around the world. And here you are with President George Bush. And tell us about this photo here.
Well, that's 9/14/2001, so just after 9/11, and you'll remember that is firefighter Bob Beckwith. He has his arm around Bob Beckwith, and my face is over there on the left. I'm about 10 feet, 15 feet, and the reason that I'm there is because I knew a state cop who happened to be down there when the president was there. And he said, "Rich, stand over here." And I said, "But wait a minute, the president is over there with the construction workers." He said, "Trust me, stand over here." So I did. And the president came over. It was like magic. But it was one of those moments. And you'll remember that the president had a bullhorn. And he was talking about, first of all, suddenly the construction workers said, "We can't hear you." And then the president ad-libbed off that and said, the people who knocked these buildings down will be hearing from us, all of us, shortly. So it was one of those moments in time where you can't even believe you're standing there down in the rubble of the World Trade Center. And I was trying to figure out how to describe how much rubble there was. So I looked at the old post office, which stands right next to the World Trade Center as we speak. It was like built in the 1930s. And the rubble went up 10 stories above the ground. And the rubble also went down 7 stories below the ground. So there was 17 stories of rubble there. And they cleared all of that away. And as I remember it, there wasn't one serious injury during that whole process, which is incredible. So that one moment, that snapshot in time, those moments that, you just can't, who else but reporters and maybe police officers, and in this case, firefighters and construction workers who happened to be there and saw that moment. It was irreplaceable. One of those moments you just indescribably impressive.
Another one that you shared, which we appreciate all of you sharing these important photos in your life and your career. You're with Cardinal Timothy Michael Dolan. Yeah, Cardinal Dolan is a great representative of the Roman Catholic faith. He is one of those irrepressible people. When you meet him, he breaks your space and puts his arms around you, basically. He's very articulate and very, very much a public figure and meant to be a leader. And of course, I knew Cardinal O'Connor first, who was an extraordinary guy as well. And he actually, when I would do an interview with him, I couldn't believe how good he was during the interview. And finally, one day I said to him, I think you're better at this than I am. He says, well, I've been doing it since 1951. He apparently had been on the radio when I was a very, very, very small child. And he was an admiral in the U.S. Navy, but he was an extraordinary person. He reached out. He was not only a Roman Catholic prelate, but he was kind of a cardinal for all of New York. He reached out certainly to the Jewish community very warmly, and in fact he played a role in establishing the diplomatic relations between the Vatican and Israel. So he was an extraordinary figure, and I got to know him first because I drove through a snowstorm one night when not much was going on. I drove out to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I was the first New York reporter to arrive. He was being named to the Archbishop of New York, and I got a chance to talk to him there, and he joked around a little bit. So it was just kind of the luck of the draw. I happened to be working that night when the news came in that he was going to be the next Archbishop. So with that, I kind of became the quote unquote Catholic reporter at the radio station, and got to cover papal elections and papal funerals and the like. Another one of great significance that you sent, Rich, was this one here. This is the area where goes back to 1988. Detective Stephen McDonald had been that location where he was shot. Tell us about this. Well, Stephen McDonald kind of became the patron saint of the NYPD. Stephen McDonald was an extraordinary guy. He was shot in Central Park. There had been a series of bicycle thefts, and a 15-year-old Shavad Buddha Jones shot him, and he became instantly a quadriplegic. In fact, they thought he was going to die. That afternoon, the doctors told his wife, Patty Ann, that he would die. But he continued on for 30 years, and he preached forgiveness. He preached peace. He actually wanted the shooter who shot him to tour with him to schools to try to emphasize that beautiful message. It didn't happen. In fact, when the shooter got out of prison, I think 2 days later, he was killed in a motorcycle accident. So that never took place. But,
Stephen McDonald just was unfazed by what happened. He thought that there was a special meaning to his life, and that he could pass that message on, and he did very powerfully.
Thanks for sharing those very important and impactful photos. We appreciate that, Rich. And Peter, you sent along some fantastic photos there as well. And tell us about the photos. I'll let you guys describe them. I can describe them, but you guys live these moments.
Yeah, this is Mike Piazza from the Mets. And in 2001, Piazza hit a very famous home run. It was the first sporting event in New York City after 9/11. He hit this iconic home run. So for the 20th anniversary of that home run, I interviewed him at Citi Field. Just a really uplifting moment for the city when the Mets weren't sure if they should be playing baseball, what their role was, and it was quiet at the stadium. And then when Piazza hit this game-winning home run, there was this cathartic experience that a lot of people felt in the ballpark and outside of the ballpark.
Really cool moments. And look at the shot here.
That was a long time ago. I'm not going to spend too much time on each photo, but this is the the Haskell family photo album. But this was the 1998 World Series. The Yankees were playing in San Diego, and that's where that's from.
Cool shot.
That's the 2009 Yankees ticker tape parade in the Canyon of Heroes, which you can see all the ticker tape on the street there. With my esteemed colleague, Rich Lamb, we covered just about every 9/11 anniversary ceremony, from the World Financial Center, from inside One World Trade while it was being built, from various locales. And this is on the plaza at the 9/11 Memorial. We always both felt this was such an important story to do, and both took great pride in telling the stories of those who died and those who lived. This is at Fenway Park covering the Yankees in the playoffs, and might have been 99 that year. We covered an earthquake in Haiti in 2010, and just the devastation was difficult to describe, but it was important for us to be there to tell the stories of what was happening and to let people in New York know what was happening there. And it was really a very moving experience for me. This is the deconstruction of the Yankee Stadium. I apologize. I sent you way too many photos here, but this is
no, it's great. Great stuff.
Yankee Stadium while it was being taken down, and I went there and did a story on the destruction of the Yankee Stadium, which really was, for any baseball fan, Yankees fan specifically, a very difficult thing to see.
To see, right? And you were capturing it, yeah.
And this is the 2001 Super Bowl where the Giants lost to the Ravens. This was in Tampa, Florida. 2004 Democratic Convention in Boston. Rich and I anchored the coverage from the 2004 Republican Convention in New York, but this was on the road in Boston. And there's Mike Piazza and Bobby Valentine, who was the Mets manager in 2001. With our former news director, Tim Shell, we did a special broadcast at Citi Field for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and spoke to a lot of Mets players from that era about the importance of baseball and sport, really as a way to help heal. And so many of those players talk about the healing powers of sports, and I know Bill knows an awful lot about that when a country was really uncertain of what was ahead and scared about the future, baseball really served as a way for the country to heal.
Beautiful photos and great stories. Thanks for sharing those, Peter. Really appreciate that, taking it out of the Haskell personal archive there. And Todd Glickman also flew across the country with some jet lag, but then dug into his archives and sent up some gems as well. Tell us about this Fan Fest, right, Todd?
Yeah, so for a number of years, as you know, we carried the New York Yankees, And each year we would have essentially a street fair at a different location. Some years we were on the Intrepid. We were at Lincoln Center Plaza. One year we were at Yankee Stadium. And Tom Kaminsky there, to my left, right on screen, would provide commentary and also do the traffic live. And I would be doing the weather live. And if you could take down that super for a quick minute, Jim, the Jim there, that box you see in front of me, the black box, that's called the Comrex Access. And that's what we use in the field to get our audio back to the radio station, and also allows us to hear what's going out over the air so we can hear the anchor in the studio. And I had one exactly like that at my house. And that's what Craig had at his house that allowed us to do the weather live from our residences.
Very cool. And as Todd was saying, the Jim Masters show is super, because I know that's what he was saying. For anybody watching, the super is this. See the graphic appear and go away?
Super.
The graphic appear. We call that the super. Here's another great shot.
So this was a holiday party. I believe this was at Steve Scott's house one year, and that's Chris Majette in the WCBS Traffic Center. Traffic and weather together.
Great shot of you guys.
And
Craig
there's
Allen.
my very, very good friend and amazing colleague, Craig Allen. I believe this was one of our anniversary broadcasts. It may have been the 40th anniversary of the radio station. I think that was at the Broadcast Center on West 57th Street. And some people out there in Radioland may know that I'm an aficionado of the New York City subway system. This picture was taken at the New York Transit Museum in Brooklyn. Each year, we had on WCBS the Hungerthon for Why Hunger. Wayne Cabot joining us today was one of the hosts of that. And I donated each year a personalized tour of the New York Transit Museum. And so here I am. This is the one, in fact, we fulfilled literally 1 week before the station went off the air. It was the last Thanksgiving's winner. Starting on the right is Andy Richter from New York Transit. He's a bus supervisor. Second from the right is Dennis Grayani, who's engineer at WCBS. And then the next set of people, the gentleman in the blue shirt, and to his left, right on screen, his family, that's John Fix, who was the high bidder. John was a student at MIT, working at the MIT radio station with me. And he had been trying to win this thing literally for 5 years. And fortunately, he won it on the last year. And finally, between me and John Fix in the pink shirt is a face that very few people know, but everybody in New York knows his voice. Stand clear of the closing doors, please. That's Charlie Pellet from Bloomberg Radio, and on the new technology subway trains, his voice comes out telling you to stand clear of those doors about once a minute. And he is a huge railroad fan as well, so he always comes and joins us on these tours. And if you want to have a good time this December, each of the 5 Sundays in December, the New York City Transit Authority runs their holiday train. It's the World War II vintage subway train. Goes from 2nd Avenue and Houston Street up to 145th Street, roughly running the D-Line Express, but it's in public service. I'm one of the volunteers on the train calling out the stops, and Charlie comes on the train to do the stand clear of the closing doors. It is hilarious when people who have no idea who he is hear his voice.
How long have you been doing that, Todd?
Beg pardon?
How long have you been doing that?
Oh, goodness. It's got to be 15, 20 years, something like that.
Yeah.
This picture was taken this past weekend out in San Francisco. I'm on the board of directors of the Market Street Railway, which advocates for preservation of historic transit in the San Francisco area. That's the oldest running rail vehicle in the world. It's a cable car. It's 141 years old and still operates.
And it operates better than New Jersey Transit does.
Sure. It's on or close to schedule every day.
On or close to schedule.
That's another one of our Fan Fest pictures. That's from the Intrepid. I guess that's Tom there in the shirt, the striped shirt. Tim Sheldo, news director, in the blue shirt just to my right. I don't recognize the other two people. Are probably from one of the other CBS radio stations. And this was a sad situation a couple of weeks ago in our studio, 10:30 in the morning there when we were doing the final broadcast. That was the Thursday, I guess, Wayne. So it's Dennis Griani on the right. There's Peter, me, Paul Murnane, and Craig Allen on the far left.
Lots of hugs, lots of tears.
Yeah,
lots of
it was an amazing, emotional day. But the job that Wayne and Paul and all the other people who came in to participate did really paid such an amazing tribute, not only to the radio station, but I guess the family of WCBS, whether you worked in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, O's, teens, 20s, we were a family. And the people out there in Radio Land knew that we were a family because they were a part of our family. And that's what made the radio station so special.
Absolutely.
Uh-oh, the host has frozen.
Cut to Todd. So this would have been when we had just opened our new studio down in Hudson Square. Wayne, what year was that we opened?
2011.
Yes, right. And so somebody asked me to come in with a coat and tie to take a picture for some publicity reason. So that one was taken then in the first week. And here Tim Sheldon and I are on the roof of our building at 345 Hudson. And that thing that looks like a cereal box is a cereal box because that was the day of the partial eclipse. And we made an eclipse viewer so that we could see the shadow of the moon on the floor of the roof of our building. And we carried it live. So Tim and I were describing it as a live broadcast.
That's incredible.
And there's Marla and me at the New York Marathon. The weather can be fickle for the marathon, as Peter knows. It can be bitterly cold and rainy and windy, and it can be absolutely gorgeous. That was one of the gorgeous days. One of the very early ones I did when Neil Bush was still flying in the traffic watch helicopter. Must have been some kind of gale force wind because I can still hear him saying, I can't get the helicopter to make any forward ground. I'm going to turn around and land this darn thing. As Joe Connolly, who we all love, is the best in the business at one of the WCBS small business breakfasts. We did 3 a year. We did one on Long Island, we did one in New Jersey, and one in Connecticut. Really brought people together to hear Joe and his guests give terrific advice. But again, it showed the sense of family that we all were. We broadcast them live. I did the weather live for most of these. And it was very well supported by the advertiser community and our listening public. And there I am again at one of the small business breakfasts doing the weather live. And that little black box in front of me is, again, the Comrex Access, which allows us to get our audio back to the radio station. And this is just one example of what I have trademarked, literally, as the Portable Weather Center.
Very, very cool.
Another marathon day. This one looks like was a little colder. But as long as I had a Diet Coke, I was happy and ready to broadcast.
We're ready to go. Levon had sent a couple of quick photos as well.
That's Levon.
Yeah. And there's another shot that he sent. And Bill, you had sent some great photos as well, Bill Schweizer. Did he? I think Bill disappeared, huh? Doesn't look like he's in the mix there. I think he got knocked off. Well, if he pops back on, there's a great shot of incomparable Bill Schweizer. Some really cool shots that he sent along here, doing his thing. Yeah, some really vintage stuff that he sent. Hopefully,
What's that funny piece of equipment?
Look at the hair.
What is that?
That's something.
I think they call that a typewriter, but I'm not sure.
That's there's probably a bottle of white out there, and
we used to call it a typewriter. It's an old-fangled piece of equipment.
So these are sports legend Bill Schweizer, and that's Levon.
Cool stuff here. Jim, I need to duck out, but I just wanted to say thank you for doing this.
Oh, Peter,
great to see my former colleagues, and I appreciate the fact that you've given us an opportunity to talk about an institution that's been so important, not only to us, but to so many people in the New York area. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And I apologize, but I do need to go.
No, Peter, the
You
honor
said,
and
Pedro.
pleasure. The honor and pleasure is all mine, Peter, and you're welcome back to our show at any time. And hopefully, in the city, maybe we can all get together and grab a bite. I would love to do that. It would be a pleasure to do that as well. So definitely stay in touch, Peter, and all the very best to you. And keep connected. And thanks for all of the time and sharing these memories with us on this special tribute that we wanted to do to honor all of you. And of course, WCBS. It was a pleasure to have you here, Peter.
Thank you so much. Take
Good night,
care.
Peter. Good to see you.
Peter.
See you guys. Take care.
All right. You be well. You take care. All right. We do have some more fabulous photos here. We showed Bill's. Wayne, you dug into the Cabot archives and sent some vintage photos as well, my friend.
That was taken by Rita Sands.
Ah.
She was quite the photographer and quite the anchor and quite the human being. She's still with us, still is. And that's, you can see all the carts in the background. And we went through most of those in an hour.
As I'm listening to you, I just, when I hear your voice, I hear WCBS. It's just like, the two are so synonymous, Wayne. Even when you're just speaking naturally with your buttery voice, it's cool stuff to hear. Great shot here.
Hey, Jim, if you can go back to that photo for a second.
Sure.
If you notice on the right-hand side, those are the water containers that Rich was talking about that spilled over him. We still had those when I got there. And there's the upside down glass next to it. The services we had back in the golden days.
Yes.
The next photograph is me with Deborah Rodriguez. That was the last day at Black Rock. By then they had moved us to a studio in the back of the 16th floor. And that was the very last afternoon before we moved over to the broadcast center in 2000, I think 2001, maybe.
It was before 9/11.
We are now on 345 Hudson. And a lighter moment. Oh, I used to eat yogurt back in those days. Before I spilled it on the board and got yelled at. Ah, yes. Great times working with Paul for all those years. We had a ton of fun.
You sure did. And you could tell you had respect for one another. That's a
pixelated version of me. We don't want the world to see that. That's
me.
A crappy shot, isn't it? That really is.
That's me in the other seat doing the weather.
Oh, it is, huh?
Yes. And above Wayne's right ear is my friend Amy Mumm. Her husband, Scott Hooper, was a broadcaster in the Boston area and another aficionado of trains and railroads and things. And Scott and I are still instructors at the Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine. So I've stayed in touch with them for all those years. They had come down to New York for a visit, and I took them on a tour of the radio station.
Very, very cool. I'm sure they really enjoyed that.
Another goofy moment, and that's Paul Murnane behind me.
Right.
This is a Black Rock, so this goes back a long time, maybe 25 years.
About 25 years, huh?
Yeah. First day at the new place. Wait a minute. Yes. You see, I have the New York radio message board on behind.
That's right.
Which has not changed its format in about 25 years. But I respect that. Random shot. Notice the McDonald's M on the notepad in front of me. Back then, the helicopter was sponsored by McDonald's. McDonald's Chopper 880. There I am with, I'm not sure. That might be Cameron Swayze next to me. I'm not.
No, I don't think so.
John Lesher, maybe?
Maybe John. Yeah.
I think that's John.
Yes.
On an election night, as I recall. There's that goofy shot again. And I'm getting older.
Yeah, getting older.
The tie's getting wider. Katie. Yes. Katie Couric would do a daily hit with us every afternoon. Before that, Dan Rather did. It was really quite a cool thing to have the evening news anchors on. There I stood up as tall as I could be to show you just how tiny she is. And Tony Guida in front is gasping for some reason.
Oh, yeah, Tony Guida. How tall are you, Wayne?
6'7".
Wow. See, you didn't know that, folks, right? You learn something new every day on the Jim Masters
People
Show.
say I sound taller.
I think you do. And thanks for sharing those, Wayne. Really appreciate that. And Anita dug into her vault. Tell us what we're seeing here as well, Anita.
It's my last day on the air. That was taken by our producer, Maggie Leone. I don't think I have the picture here available, but there is one great shot in which Maggie's taking a bunch of pictures, and the very last one before she hands me my phone, she's photobombed me out front, and I'm there behind her going with my mouth agape. But it's an absolute great shot. The other thing about Wayne being that tall as Wayne and Steve Scott and all of the other gentlemen on our staff are, I am not. So when I would come in and do a midday, and I would be in the same place Wayne was, the microphone would literally be positioned over my head.
And did you rise up to meet the mic, or did you drop it down?
I would have to jump and retrieve the mic. That is from a previous incarnation. That's from WJRZ with my partner, Jay Sorensen. And this was before we made the transition from Oldies 100 to 100.1 WJRZ. The running joke was that, on the picture before, the running joke was that because that studio was actually designed for one person, I was not allowed to gain any weight.
Yeah.
This was a picture taken by the late Al Jasbo Collins at WNEW. As you can see, it is, we did have the computer. His name was Igor, but it wasn't set up to do things like scheduling. So that's me in the process of scheduling promos by hand.
Wow.
That one we call the We Are the World photo. That's from Z100, our Friday morning shout sing-along. And if you look very closely behind me is John Bell, a.k.a. Professor Jonathan B. Bell.
Wow, that's a great shot. When was that taken? Do you recall?
1985.
That was back in 85. That is a great shot. Cool stuff. Thanks for sharing that as well. Some really amazing memories we're sharing here. What are some memories, gang, of the station itself that you want to share maybe with viewers who are watching and they're hanging on to every word? And we have a lot of live comments. Everybody loves you guys, and they're sending, thoughts, and they're sharing their memories as well. We've been sprinkling a few of those on the screen, and we thank everybody who's watching live. And this will be archived on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. So if you missed anything or joined us late, you can see it again. What are some memories of the station itself that maybe you want to share, and your feeling about the time overall that you spent at WCBS 880? I'll start with you, Rich.
One of the amazing things at Black Rock was that you didn't have to wear earphones, at least at the beginning, as I remember it. You could sit in the studio, and somehow the engineers had figured out a way that you could turn the mic on and not have to have earphones. And it was kind of a remarkable thing. I'd never seen that at any other radio station. And when we moved out, that was kind of a major moment because, 2 floors above us, Walter Cronkite had an office, and in the next to last top floor, William S. Paley had his office. So there was a lot of tradition involved with that building. And when we left, it felt like we were leaving home. It was Paley, I was told, had 88 on his license plate. And so he loved the radio station. And in the old days, he used to call once in a while. And Chris Borgen told me that when Channel 2 came up, he used to call over there and discuss the newscast. So he was a hands-on owner who really wanted to provide a tremendous product. And you'll remember he came back as chairman at one point when he was dissatisfied with the direction of the company. So it was a remarkable place. And then the broadcast center, you never knew who you're going to ride up with in the elevator, right, Wayne? I mean, 60 Minutes guys were there, the evening news people. It was a star-studded elevator ride, and it was pretty amazing to be over there. And Hudson, it was a different experience down there. But we really, every physical plant was very different. And I think the last one, of course, was probably the most technologically advanced. But I could not imagine being an anchor down there because it looked like you had to be able to play a Wurlitzer organ and a piano at the same time. It's just crazy. All the switches and pots that you had to control there and all the remotes.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. How about you, Jim?
Well, I remember when I was first going to the actual studios at 345. I was never at Black Rock. But going up the elevator to the 11th floor, going through that first door, and then seeing these huge glass doors in front of the giant WCBS Newsradio 880 logo in the hallway, and then walking through a second set of huge glass doors and seeing a support beam with WCBS 880 all over it, and then the awards and the trophy showcase, walking into that newsroom that was just a hub of activity, just going, I can't believe that I'm here. And this is just unbelievable. And I was at the time, my hours were from 9 to I think 3:30. So working with Wayne and Paul in the morning. And that was just a thrill seeing Wayne and Paul, just as I'm walking, looking across the newsroom into the air studio and seeing the two of them going, wow, this is amazing, and freaking out all at the same time. But they made it easy for a new guy to come in and take over for Chris Majette, who was a staple of the traffic in the middays on 880 for the longest time. And I just want to thank Wayne and Paul and Chris for all their support through all that time. It was just an amazing place to be. In my little corner in the newsroom, just that one little edit bay that they gave us, just was an amazing time.
And Wayne, how about you, my friend?
By the way, Jim, you weren't the only one freaking out when Paul and I were on the air. That's many of our program directors. Jim Masters, thank you for asking the question. Thank you for inviting me. And I've got to say, Rich Lamb was talking about the elevator rides and all the famous people we would see. The whole experience has been an amazing ride. When I think that I started at a time in an analog world when there wasn't a public internet, when there wasn't really cable television news channels, when we still used telephones and typewriters, to see the transformation from old media to new media, and to have withstood the transformation and adapted to it as best we could over the years and lasted as long as we did, is an amazing ride, an amazing privilege to have not only witnessed so much history, but had the privilege and responsibility of describing it and reporting on it. Is something that words defy. And I'm so grateful to all my colleagues who've supported all of us over the years, people you see on this screen, people behind the scenes. What a team, what a family, what an experience, what a blessing.
Beautifully said, my friend. I just wanted to ask you as well, what was it like putting that final weekend together? Because you had a lot of fun, shared a lot of incredible moments. People were really listening on the edge of their seats, and it was very emotional at the very end when you heard the tone. What only you know what that feeling was like, putting it together, and then as it was airing. I remember, I think I heard you say in the interview, maybe on television or something, somebody asked, will it be, they're live or will it be pre-recorded? And you said something about, when you hear those tones, you might need a box of Kleenex or something with you, knowing that the wrap-up was coming. What was that like, putting it together and then having that air? And thank you to you and everybody for doing it. And of course, the folks that you were. So one of the beautiful things, you're all professionals. And one of the things you did was you thanked, the station for giving you the opportunity to do that, because we know that in a lot of times in these industries, that never happens. You get a cardboard box, you have 10 minutes, don't talk to anybody, don't touch the computers, and exit. But you had the opportunity to put a beautiful weekend of tribute and thanks together for everybody, which was stellar. What was that like for you to do, Wayne?
Well, it was profound. It was daunting. It was intimidating. And it was exhilarating in a sense, in that here we were giving a final send-off to this being that was WCBS. It was, in a sense, a funeral. It was a wake. We tried to keep it respectful and lighthearted and not morbid. I think we did a good job. I say we all contributed to it. In fact, it was Paul Murnane's idea to do the 4 tones at the end, which I thought was beautiful. If anybody remembers the radio station from way back, that was something that every hour you'd hear the 4 tones. In fact, at one point it was top and bottom of the hour, and it was distinctively WCBS. And that went away. Those tones went away in the late 80s, but they still resonated here and in our collective auditory perception of the radio station. But when I put that together, I got to be honest with you, Jim, I foolishly didn't think it was going to really be heard by more than a few people who were just up at that hour. It was a Sunday late night. It was the domain of so many people who were out late partying, or who knows what their situation was in life. I didn't consider that it would be shared and rebroadcast and put on YouTube and talked about by conservative talk radio, who I think a lot of them had a lot of fun with it. They didn't appreciate the description of the news desert being wider and drier, and the need for us to be diligent in sourcing the material that we listen to and consume, and that doing so is patriotic. That is a word that some people don't think belongs to the news media. I believe it's the duty of all of us to do the best we can to try to know what we're talking about. That's what all of us have been doing all the years, try to talk about what we know and not talk about what we don't know. And it's getting more and more difficult to do that. So all these thoughts are in my head, the legacy of the radio station, all the people, what it represents in terms of where we are today in a democracy, in an information vacuum. So I was going through, and I was first given a half an hour, which I thought was a tremendous amount of time, and it was. At the last minute, I was told to cut it down to 15 minutes, which I thought was more appropriate. So I kind of slammed and jammed it and tried to get it to the time, and didn't give it a whole lot of thought. And I don't mean that in a throwaway way. It seemed to me that it wasn't going to be something that was going to live on. And the fact that people have embraced it the way they do, and something that I pretty much ad-libbed and sort of pieced it together and made some edits along the way, had I known how much it would be, that Howard Stern would be making fun of it, had I known that it was going to be on CNN the next day, had I known anything about it, that it would have such an impact, it probably would have been much worse. I would have put a lot more thought into it. I would have overthought it. It wouldn't have been as authentic, as natural and from the heart. So I think it all worked out the way it was meant to.
It sure did. And the choice of John Lennon at the very end, too, was a nice touch, Wayne.
That was Ray Martell's idea. He pointed out to me that every legacy radio station in New York has left the airwaves playing that song. And I thought, well, why not? After all, it's midnight. Who's going to hear it?
We all did.
I know.
We all did. Heard it and felt it, for sure. Thank you for sharing that, Wayne. How about you, Anita?
When Jim Feldman made reference to the double sets of doors that you come through, when you come through that second set of doors, the first thing that you will pass is the sign dedicating the Rich Lamb newsroom in honor of his 43 years of service. So that's something as you walk in the door that you get to see. The fact that somebody like Rich was there for 43 years. Wayne was there for, I think, nearly 37. Todd's been there since 1979. Jim and I are the newbies. But here's a message for the people who are watching this, who are listeners. As much as you've been kind enough to welcome us into your homes and to say how much you have enjoyed having us bring you the news, that's how much we've enjoyed bringing you the news. Whether it was good or bad, whether it was out of our living rooms during the pandemic, whether it was in the middle of the night or at the dawn's early light. The other thing is that the radio station was indeed a family, but it was also a working family. And so when there was a blackout on a Saturday night, conveniently located on the anniversary of a previous blackout, Peter Haskell, Steve Burns called in to be able to give their perspective from Midtown and the Upper West Side. When there was thought to be, and you'll remember this, Wayne, there was thought to be an earthquake centered on Roosevelt Island. I had been on the air until midnight the night before, and their producer, Rivka Oppenheim, calls me up and said, "Can you tell us what's going on there?" I go, "Well, I'm on the other side of the river, but I can tell you that the walls shook." So it was the kind of thing where everybody, whether they were supposed to be on the air at that moment or not, everybody did continue to contribute from whatever perch they had. People, would, jump in to do whatever. Like on that night of that blackout, I was the alternating anchor with the late Maria Garcia. And so I ended up getting pressed into service, trying to get all of the information out of Con Ed. Neil Caruso, who had been the producer handing off to Laura Callarausch, stayed on for another 3 hours to make sure that we got all of the information. And again, this was not an isolated circumstance. Everybody always pitched in to get the job done. And again, as much as you've loved having us bring it to you, we've loved bringing it to you.
And you've done it in fine style. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anita. And Todd Glickman?
So I had the privilege of riding twice in the WCBS traffic helicopter, once with Neil Bush it was probably 1980, when he had the two-person helicopter that looked like the MASH chopper, where he was the pilot and the broadcaster and the communicator to air traffic control all at once. And then some years later, Tommy took me up, Tom Kaminsky, in the four-seater, which was flown at the time by Ed Baker. And when you look out over New York and you're broadcasting to New York from that helicopter, and you think about the 8 million people in the 5 boroughs and the 16 plus million in the metropolitan area that rely upon you for honest, credible information, it's a little bit daunting. But I think we managed to pull that off. And I'll just end with a quick story from 2 nights ago. I was in San Francisco at a public event, and I ran into a couple there who turns out they're from my hometown of Roslyn Heights, Long Island. We're about the same age. They went to the neighboring high school, different one than I did. They worked at the same summer camp that I worked at. And when I told them my name, they literally started to cry. And they said, "We relied on that radio station for credible, honest information every day for decades, and we don't know where to turn now." And I didn't know what to say.
Really, it's been an extraordinary conversation that we've had. I call these conversations, not really interviews, this series that I launched at the beginning of the pandemic, playing off my work in the industry. And I said it in the beginning and I'll say it again. And I know that a lot of people are watching this live and will watch it later. Just want to thank each of you and the folks who aren't with us now and the folks who were with us earlier. Thank you so much. Just thank you for, being so warm, friendly, professional, doing a superior job and doing it for the right reasons and doing it out of a passion and a love and enjoying each other's company. No day is perfect. Broadcasting, it's a ever-changing industry and can be crazy and nutty. But obviously, the amount of years all of you have been in it and on that particular station is a testament to not only your excellence and people really appreciating all of you, but to your staying power and your tenacity and your love for what you've done and continue. So I wish you all nothing but continued blessings. And I always say on the show to all of our guests, we'll keep the porch light on for you. You're absolutely welcome back here at any time. I hope we do all get together and break bread. It would be fantastic. Talk shop, just say hello. And I really appreciate the generosity of time, of openness, authenticity, all the stories, the laughs, the memories, and sharing that. Because I know it's still recent and it's fresh. And, it's something that you'll take with you for the rest of your lives. And know that all of us broadcasters, as well as fans of the station and all of you, have been moved by your work and your passion for it. So I really thank you so much for stopping by our show, being so enthusiastic about wanting to be on the show, celebrating what we're doing here. And I really hope you'll come to see us again. And I hope, and I'll start, do a little round robin here. Rich, I hope you enjoyed the time with me as I absolutely have with you, my friend.
Oh, I enjoyed being here, and it was it really, we were walking down memory lane together, and it's there's so many memories. When you've worked there for 43 years, you have to pick a few of them. One that we really didn't get to was the night that John Lennon was killed, and I want to mention Peter Becker, who had a broadcast on WCBS called On Record. He was an expert in music, and he brought us the meanings of John Lennon's life. And I just ran across this quote today, and if you don't mind, I would read it. I think it, in a way, it symbolizes the heart of what we did on WCBS. And this quote is from Yoko Ono. It says, "The night John died, there were so many people outside the Dakota. They were singing and playing John's songs. Hearing his songs in the street was very difficult for me. I was sitting alone in our bedroom, which was on 72nd Street side, and John was singing all night." It was another night when WCBS signed off, and I think sometimes the midnight hour can be very emotional.
It was a perfect time. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rich. Todd, how about you?
So to everybody who's watching this show, we thank you. And you've heard a little bit from people that you've gotten to know over the 50 plus years of WCBS. But for every one of us on the air behind the microphone, we're probably three people behind the scenes: the producers, the writers, the editors, the salespeople, the people put the commercials together, the jingles, everything. And they deserve as much, if not more, credit than we, because without them, we would have not been a radio station. So I thank them.
Absolutely. Jim Feldman?
Well, Jim, I want to echo everybody and thank you for doing this. This has been really a great conversation that we're able to have with each other. We haven't, most of the people haven't seen each other since this all happened. But what I wanted to say to the listeners and those who are watching now, that we never took your trust for us and for granted, that we wanted to make sure that the information we put out was accurate, was timely, was necessary. And we appreciate everybody listening for all these years. Everybody throws the word family around, but this was one big, and is one big happy family. Whether you listen to the radio station or whether you worked at the radio station, it is still one big happy family. And again, Jim, I wanted to thank you for putting this together. This has just been a fantastic time. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching as well.
The pleasure is all mine. It's something that I knew I wanted to do as soon as I heard the news, and I wanted to respect and honor the station, that we all love and pay heed to it and homage to it, but also give you an opportunity to share your stories and connect with viewers that are watching and spend time with us. And again, this was a pleasure for me to sort of put together here and slap together, and to have you guys pop on. It's just been an honor, and new friends made with everybody here for sure. Anita, how about you?
So thank you first for putting this together, Jim. It was a great opportunity to be able to speak to the listeners, to speak to each other, because as Jim Feldman noted, we haven't seen each other since that fateful day. To circle back to something that Todd said, I am one of the few people who has worked as writer, producer, and anchor. I started as anchor, originally hired as a writer, actually, but I was an anchor for 5 years before I ever became a writer officially. And I actually did all 3 jobs in the last week alone. And so I want to say that, Todd is absolutely right that, no matter who you may have heard coming out of your speakers, there was a village behind that person putting things together. And also, as Jim said, we appreciate the trust that you placed in us to get you accurate information. As I said when I was doing my sign off, there are lots of places where you can get opinion. Our job is to give you the facts so that you can form your own opinion. And I hope that that's something that we were able to do. And I also think that it's only appropriate that you're going to end this, and I'll hand off to my friend Wayne Cabot.
You knew you're intuitive, Anita. He took us out on that fateful evening, and we definitely have to have Mr. Cabot do that here. Wayne?
Oh, no.
You're not muting yourself on the final, are you? He's speechless. He's tongue-tied.
Yeah, I forgot you got to turn the damn microphone on. Rich Lamb, who just popped back on the screen, told me a long time ago that the main rule at WCBS, or at least his, and I tried to adopt it, was never let your standards drop. If you recorded a piece that you didn't quite like, do it again until you like it. And that always stuck with me. And the fact that we have this amazing family, the fact that we have the family that extends to hundreds, thousands who've reached out to us, who felt that we were part of their family. It's just tremendous. I can't say enough. And Jim, thank you for putting this together, giving us one opportunity, maybe one last opportunity. Probably it is. It's been a month, and it still feels real, still feels raw. And I appreciate you for giving us this moment. Thank you.
The pleasure is all mine. And again, I really am honored by the fact that you guys took the time to join us, and for the amount of time you did. I wish you well. Come see us again. And once again, thank you so very much for all of the years on the iconic WCBS News 88. So many people, sharing their stories about how they heard it, in the kitchens, in the car. It's a part of people's lives, generations, for so many years. And you guys had the pleasure of being a part of that and creating some of that history for all of us. And Wayne still has a lot of mail to go through on his desk as people.
I've gotten more since then, believe it or not.
I don't doubt, my friend. Well, this is our love letter to all of you and to the iconic 88, the big 88 in New York. Thank you, everybody. Come see us again. Stay in touch. And I hope we get a chance to break bread in the city or what have you. That would be an honor and a pleasure, my friends. Thank you very much for being with us on the show, and spread the word about our show too. We would appreciate that. You be well, okay?
Night. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
all right. You take care.
Jim.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Todd. Take care. We'll see you. And Anita, thank you for joining us as well. And Jim Feldman, thank you for joining us. Anita, thank you for all of your support and love as well. And Wayne, thank you. Anita, you were a rock star, sharing everything and getting the word out too. We love you,
Thank
Anita.
Thank you. I guess I'm the last person standing or sitting.
Yes. With the
Good night, everybody.
With the colors and the lights. I mean, you went all out for the Jim Masters show. I tell you, I love it. You be well, my friend. You take care.
Take
Okay.
care.
Bye now. What a great group of incredible people on the iconic WCBS News 88 in New York City. Whether you are from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area or not, I noticed a lot of people commenting from Iowa and Colorado and Detroit and Maryland and Canada and Kansas and all over celebrating the station. The station, obviously, if you tuned in late, the station is no longer. The station is no longer that format. It has been for almost 60 years, and the station itself is close to 100. It had switched over to ESPN Radio. So it's a new thing that they're doing, but we just wanted to, rewind a little bit and look back at the station because they had been around for so long. For me, being a broadcaster, I wanted to thank everybody for all their years. Again, my dad had it on. Our family had it on in the kitchen and in the car, and I always, had it on. And my father would have it on in that transistor radio as he was shaving in the bathroom. You would hear it. You'd hear top of the hour, and all those famous people and all those great names. So as a listener and as a fan, I thank everybody at the station and all of our illustrious guests. And as a fellow television and radio broadcast person myself, I thank them for a job well done. Wasn't easy, biggest market, big station, but boy, they really knocked it out of the park, huh? And we'll have them back in different ways, shapes, and forms. Our very special guests, Wayne Cabot, Todd Glickman, Anita Bonita, Peter Haskell, Levon Putney, Bill Schweizer, Rich Lamb, Jim Feldman. Really special event here on the Jim Masters Show. And of course, as I mentioned, all the icons that passed through the WCBS airwaves over the years, some still with us, some no longer with us. We thank them all. And we also thank all of you as well as we shared our memories of WCBS 880 in good old New York. Thanks for all of your comments as well. We've been seeing them piling in here. This was really wonderful. And we thank you for all the love. And David Smith says, great show, Jim. Thank you very much. And Kathleen in New York City, who also grew up with WCBS and her family as well. Awesome show. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much as well. She even went further. She even supporting the Jim Masters Show series with a super sticker. So kind of you there in Queens, New York City. Thank you very much. And Virginia, thank you as well. And Rising Phoenix, glad you enjoyed our show. We've been sprinkling in some of these terrific comments. Otto, thank you as well. The pleasure is all mine. Come see us again. We have shows every day here on the Jim Masters Show live entertainment lifestyle celebrity talk show series. And go back in the archives, check out some of the amazing episodes with a lot of great people from Hollywood and television, film, stage, sports, comedy, you name it, all coming by. Broadway, film stars, child stars, and so much more here on the Jim Masters Show. Philip, thank you as well. Don't forget, we would love it if you give this episode a like and you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Spread the word. We have so many great shows in store and so many great shows that we have done that are all archived. Give the episode a like if you enjoyed this or you loved it. I wish they had a love button, but it is a like button. Click the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Binge watch hundreds and hundreds of past episodes with celebrity friends and guests. Share the episode on your social media and leave a comment in the comments section. What are some of your WCBS memories? Some of the folks you got a chance to hear from here, maybe the first time you're seeing their faces, or having an opportunity to learn a little bit more about their lives and how they got into the broadcasting industry and their passion for it as well. And for all of you who have been supporting, what we're doing here, all these shows coming at you live, unscripted, no teleprompter, no pre-prepared questions, all free-flowing, real and conversational, sort of old school, like Cabot and Merv and Regis and all the rest. Thank you so much for your love and support as well. And if this was your first time checking out the Jim Masters Show, we welcome you to the JMS family here, the Lovely family. We love having you here. A couple more comments coming in here. This was great. Joseph, thank you. Welcome to the Jim Masters Show. It was great to put the faces to the voices, wasn't it? My pleasure as well. Thank you for your comment. Come see us again. You're now part of the Jim Masters Show family. As much as you were part of the WCBS family, you're now part of the Jim Masters Show family. Everybody here who joined us. And 66 Kimball, you saw the tribute show we did to Peter Marshall, where we had Mark Summers and John Davidson and so many. Claudia Kagan, the entertainment producer or supervising producer for Entertainment Tonight, was with us, and so many fabulous people. You can go check those episodes out in the archives here on our YouTube channel. Again, one more time, we have to thank our illustrious guests who took time out of a busy life to stop by the Jim Masters Show and share their unique stories and special memories and fun moments and serious moments, photos, and a whole bunch of stuff. Wanted to do this. I'm glad we did. And I thank you for joining us here as we put this all together. We love having you here. Don't forget to take care of one another, love one another, and come back and see us. And don't forget to take care of yourself. And again, for all of us here, I am your host, Jim Masters, thanking you for your time this time. Till next time here on the Jim Masters Show live series. Come see us again. We love you. Take care. Be well. And cheers. And here's a little something before we roll our credits that we did in the beginning. And it'll bring back a little memory for you as we take things out. Here you go.